My name is Julie. I was the first child my mom had while she was still figuring things out. She married my dad, Thomas, right after high school. They were in love but didn't have much money, and that didn't work out for them. I was still a little kid when she met Richard, a man with lots of money and a fancy car. She left my dad, took me with her, and never looked back except to get the alimony checks. Richard seemed nice at first. He would bring me treats and let me play in his big office with shiny things. But Mom acted differently around him. She looked at me like I reminded her of a past she wanted to forget. One evening, I overheard them talking in the kitchen while I was supposed to be watching TV. Mom said, "She's too much like Tom," in a sharp tone. I didn't understand then, but it hurt to hear her talk like I was a problem. I loved my real dad, even though he lived in a small apartment across the city. Every moment with him was fun, whether we were playing ball in the park or eating cheap pizza. Mom's harsh words stayed with me, and she kept using them. Whenever I tried to help or do my schoolwork, she would say things like, "Can't you do anything right?" Dad was different. He would always tell me, "You're doing great, Julie," whenever I showed him my grades or drawings. He encouraged me to ignore anyone who said otherwise. Things with Mom and Richard got tougher when I started school. Mom cared a lot about appearances and always complained about my clothes and friends. She would compare me to other kids and criticize me for not fitting in. One day, after a particularly harsh scolding about my muddy shoes, I snapped back, saying, "At least Dad doesn't yell about a bit of dirt." Her slap was quick and stung my cheek before I even saw it coming. "Don't talk about your father like that," she hissed, her breath smelling of coffee and anger. I wanted to cry but held back, just like Dad taught me. That night, lying in bed, I promised myself I wouldn't let her see me cry or give her the satisfaction. When Mom announced she was pregnant again, the house felt different, like something was about to change, but maybe not for the better. Mom had that glow people talk about, but it never seemed to be for me. She told us one evening, rubbing her belly, "I'm having a baby with Richard. It's going to be perfect." Richard, always charming, added, "We'll need to redo the guest room to make it fit for a little princess." My heart sank when I realized they were talking about my room. I asked, "What about my room?" trying to stay calm. Mom gave me a tight smile and said, "You can move into the smaller room, Julie. It's only fair. The baby needs the space." The way she said it made it sound like there was no room for discussion. So I packed up my things and moved to the smallest room in the house, barely bigger than a closet. The months went by quickly, and soon Lily was born. Everyone was talking about her, saying how beautiful she was. Mom would gush to her friends, cradling Lily as if she were made of the finest porcelain. "Yeah, she's cute," I would say, trying to join in. Lily was adorable, and I loved her the moment I saw her. I wanted to be a good big sister and help out. One afternoon, I tried to sneak into Lily's room while Mom was busy in the kitchen. I tiptoed in and peered over the crib at my baby sister, who was happily gurgling. "Hey there, Lily," I whispered, reaching out a finger for her to grab. Mom must have heard me because she appeared at the door suddenly, her voice sharp. "What are you doing, Julie? I told you, you need to ask before going into her room." "I just wanted to see her," I protested, feeling tears well up in my eyes. I wanted to help, but Dad was different. One weekend when I was with him, we were having pizza at our favorite place, and I opened up about how Mom was always on edge with me around Lily. I told him it felt like she thought I'd break her or something. Dad thought for a moment and said, "You know, Julie, some people have a hard time sharing love. They think there's only so much to go around. But you've got a big heart. Don't let your mom's ways make you think otherwise." His words made me feel a little better, but back at Mom's house, things didn't improve. Even when I tried to talk about school or friends, Mom was always half listening, her attention mostly on Lily. One day, I came home with a school award for second place in the science fair. I was excited and showed Mom the certificate while she was feeding Lily. "Look, Mom, I won this," I said, holding it out. "That's nice, dear," she replied without looking up. "Put it on the fridge or something." I put the certificate on the fridge, a bit crooked, and stepped back. It felt like just another piece of paper, another day overshadowed by Lily. By the time I reached high school, things were really rough at home. Mom was cold, and Richard seemed indifferent. I felt more like a guest than a family member. Then, out of the blue, Mom said it was time for me to live with Dad permanently. She told me at dinner, just the two of us. while Richard was still at work and Lily was already asleep. "Julie, we need to talk about your future," Mom said, pushing her food around her plate with a fork. Her voice was cold and businesslike, which made me nervous. "What about it?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my heart was racing. "We've been discussing things," Mom said, "and we think it's best if you move in with your father. With the new baby coming, things here are complicated. You're not a child anymore. You need your own space, and we can't provide that here, not with the new situation. It's cramped, and frankly, the financial burden is more than we expected." I almost choked on my water. Move in with Dad? But why? I thought everything was fine here. Mom sighed deeply. "Look, Julie, it's just not working out. You'll be better off with your dad." "It's better for everyone this way," Mom said. I pushed my plate away, no longer hungry. "What about school and my friends?" I asked. "You can go to a new school and make new friends," she replied, as if it were that simple, like I could just erase my old life and start fresh without any trouble. The next few weeks were a blur. I packed up my things, books, clothes, and a few keepsakes that meant something to me, into boxes. Richard barely said goodbye, and Lily, too young to understand, gave me a confused hug. Moving day was hard. Dad lived on the other side of town in a modest apartment. It was clean but cluttered with reminders of a life that had been on hold since Mom left him. When I arrived, Dad was there waiting with open arms and a worried smile. The apartment was nothing like the house I grew up in. My new room was much smaller, with walls that needed painting and a window facing a brick wall. But it was quiet, and Dad was trying his best. The first day at my new school was tough. As I walked down the crowded hallways, I could feel the stares and hear the whispers. "That's the new girl," as if I were some kind of oddity. In class, I kept to myself, doodling in my notebook to block out the murmurs. When the bell rang, I was the first to leave, not wanting to linger. At home, Dad noticed my mood. "How was school?" he asked, trying to sound upbeat. "It was fine," I lied, shrugging off my coat and dumping my bag by the door. "If it gets tough, you tell me, okay? We're in this together." "You're not alone, Julie," he said. His words meant a lot, but the loneliness I felt was deep and gnawing. It wasn't just about missing my old friends or the big house. It was about feeling unwanted and pushed out, like I was a burden. Adjusting to life at Dad's wasn't easy, but I knew if I didn't pull myself together, things would only get worse. One morning, I woke up, looked around my small room, and decided it was time to take charge of my life. "No one else is going to do it for me," I muttered to myself. Dad noticed the change right away. Over breakfast one day, he looked up from his coffee and said, "You seem more determined these days, Julie. What's on your mind?" I stirred my cereal, trying to find the right words. "I want to make something of myself, Dad. I don't want to end up stuck," I said. He nodded, a serious expression on his face. "I hear you, kiddo. So what's the plan?" "That big scholarship for top students, I'm going to get it," I declared, more to convince myself than him. Dad's smile was just the encouragement I needed. "If anyone can get it, it's you. Just let me know what you need from me." School was tough. I spent long hours catching up and even more time buried in books. My teachers noticed the change. Even the strict ones seemed to respect my effort. One day, Mr. Jensen, my math teacher, kept me after class. "Julie, your work has improved a lot. What's the goal?" he asked. "I need that scholarship," I replied bluntly, packing up my stuff. "I've got plans, and they don't include being stuck here forever." Mr. Jensen studied me for a moment before nodding. "Well, keep at it and let me know if you need extra help. I'm here." Making friends wasn't easy, but I found a few people who didn't mind that I wasn't always the life of the party. During lunch, I sat with Maria and Luke, two kids who weren't exactly popular but knew how to laugh. "So, Julie, you're like a library ninja now," Luke joked one day, nudging me as we sat down with our trays. I cracked a smile. "Yeah, gotta be stealthy if I want to snag the best study spots." Maria, her voice soft but sincere, said, "It's cool what you're doing, Julie. Most people wouldn't bother." As the days turned into months and the pressure built up with the approaching application deadlines, Dad was my rock. He was always there with a hot meal and a listening ear whenever the stress became too much. The day the scholarship letter arrived, my hands were shaking as I opened it. Dad was right there, holding his breath. I read the words with my heart pounding, and when I realized I had won, I let out a cheer so loud I'm sure the neighbors heard. "I got it, Dad. I got it," I yelled, waving the letter like a victory flag. Dad swept me into a big hug, laughing and cheering with me. "I knew you could do it," he said. A few months later, as I packed up my things for college, I felt ready. The future seemed bright, and for the first time, it felt like it was truly mine. I was leaving, but I was taking all the lessons, love, and hard-earned wisdom with me. After graduating with honors and starting a solid career, I felt like I was finally on stable ground. I was 28, doing well professionally, and had just started seeing a wonderful guy from work, Jack, who had been nothing but supportive. Then, out of the blue, my mom called. We hadn't spoken much since I moved out, but suddenly she was back with a request, or rather, a demand. "Julie, your sister Lily is going to college in your city. We've paid her tuition and think it would be best if she stayed with you," Mom said, her tone making it clear this wasn't just a suggestion. I hesitated, remembering our strained relationship, but I wanted to believe things could be different. "Okay, Mom, I'll help Lily out. It might be nice to reconnect," I said, trying to sound positive. Lily moved in a week later, and it was clear we were very different. She was always focused on her appearance and had high maintenance needs. On her first evening, she asked, "Can you make sure we have almond milk and kale? I'm on a special diet." "Sure, I'll add them to the grocery list," I replied, trying to be accommodating. But living with Lily was harder than I expected. She partied all the time, coming home at dawn with loud laughter, while I was anxious about work. One afternoon, Jack came over while Lily was getting ready for a night out. I noticed how she smiled at him a little too sweetly. After she left, Jack said, "Julie, I think Lily's got the wrong idea about me. She's been flirting." I felt a mix of anger and embarrassment. "Thanks for telling me, Jack. I'll talk to her." When I confronted Lily, she laughed it off. "Oh, come on, Julie. I'm just being friendly. Besides, can I help it if he likes me back?" "That's my fiancé, Lily. You need to respect that," I said firmly. Her laugh chilled me. "Julie, I'm used to getting what I want. I always have been." That was the last straw. I couldn't live like this, constantly feeling I had to guard my life from my own sister. "You need to find another place to live, Lily. This isn't working out," I told her firmly. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Within an hour, my phone rang. It was Mom, her voice cold and sharp. "You're such an envious girl, Julie. Can't stand to see your sister happy, can you?" "I just want respect, Mom. That's all," I replied, but it felt like talking to a wall. After that, things went quiet with Lily. I heard she dropped out of college and was living off her charm and social connections. I focused on my life with Jack, my work, and rebuilding my boundaries. 2 years later, things were going well for me. I was advancing at work, and life with Jack was great. Then I heard about Lily. She had dropped out and was getting married to a rich guy she'd met. Feeling a mix of curiosity and goodwill, I called home to offer congratulations. Mom answered, her voice as cold as ever. "Don't bother. We're not waiting for you at the wedding. It's for rich people only, and we don't need any beggars there." Her words cut deep. I tightened my grip on the phone, feeling the old sting of rejection. "Really, Mom? That's how you're going to be? What did you expect, Julie? You've always been the difficult one." "Just stay away," she said before hanging up. I stood there, the dial tone echoing in my ear. The hurt was real, but I wasn't going to let it break me. I later found out that Lily's wedding was lavish, with popular artists and actors. Life moved on for me too. Jack proposed, and suddenly I was planning my own wedding. Nothing extravagant, but filled with love and sincerity. I called Dad to share the news. "That's wonderful, Julie. I wouldn't miss it for the world," he said, his voice brimming with happiness. Encouraged by Dad's reaction, I decided to make one last attempt to reconnect with Mom. I dialed Mom's number, my heart racing. When she answered, I said, "Mom, I'm getting married. I'd really like you to come." Her reply was icy. "No, Julie, I'm not interested in some modest gathering. Count me out." I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "Okay, Mom, take care." I hung up, knowing it might be the last time I'd invite her into my life. Our wedding was simple but beautiful. Dad walked me down the aisle, and his presence was a steady comfort. The room was filled with genuine smiles and heartfelt congratulations, unlike the grandeur and coldness of Lily's wedding. Our modest reception was full of laughter, dancing, and stories. Jack and I celebrated with friends and family who loved us for who we were, not for our money or status. Life was moving along well. Jack and I were thrilled to be expecting our first child. One ordinary afternoon, my phone rang and turned my day upside down. It was Mom, and she wasn't calling with congratulations. "Julie, you have to take us in. We're desperate," she said, skipping any pleasantries. "What's going on?" I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. "Richard's business failed. We mortgaged the house for Lily's wedding, and now it's all gone. Lily's marriage is over, and her husband kicked her out, demanding money for her cheating," she explained, her voice full of panic. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. "Okay, slow down. What exactly are you asking?" "We need a place to stay. All of us. We're coming to your house," she said as if it were obvious. Her demand hit me hard. "No, Mom, you can't just decide to move in with us. It doesn't work like that. You owe us after everything we've done for you," she snapped. I felt a surge of anger. "Oh, Mom, remember how you were when I needed you most? You pushed me out and chose everything over me. Now you expect me to open my doors?" Her voice rose. "You're being selfish, Julie. Where is your family spirit? I am your mother." "Being a mother doesn't mean making demands," I shot back. "It's not about debts." Her fury was palpable. "You'll regret this, Julie. I might even take you to court to get what I deserve." I laughed, though it was more from disbelief. "Go ahead and try. Dad was my guardian when you kicked me out. What will you claim? Your daughter wouldn't let you live off her after you threw her out." There was a pause, and I could almost hear her thinking. "This isn't over, Julie," she hissed before hanging up. After that call, life felt like a fresh start. Jack and I were busy preparing the nursery, picking paint colors, and assembling the crib. On a sunny Sunday morning, I was folding baby clothes and putting them neatly into the new dresser. Jack was busy drilling something while I was organizing baby things. He looked over with a smile and asked, "How's it going, Julie? Need any help?" "I got it, thanks," I said, running my hand over a tiny Wednesday, just thinking about everything. "It's really happening, huh?" "It really is. We're going to be parents," Jack said, his voice a mix of awe and nervous excitement. Then there was a knock at the door. Jack went to answer it while I continued organizing. I heard voices and Jack called out, "Julie, it's for you." I was surprised to see my dad at the door, holding a teddy bear and grinning. "Surprise," he said. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I asked, rushing over to hug him. "I wanted to see how my favorite daughter is doing," he said, handing me the teddy bear, "and I brought something for my future grandchild." "Thank you, Dad. It means a lot that you're here," I said, feeling emotional. Dad looked around at the baby furniture and books. "Looks like you're almost ready." "We're trying. It's a lot, but we're excited," I told him. Then I hesitated. "Dad, I had another call with Mom. It didn't go well." Dad's smile faded. I heard she wasn't pleased. "No, she wasn't," I said firmly, but I had to stand my ground. "We need peace here, for me, Jack, and the baby." The day passed with Dad sharing stories and giving us some amusing parenting advice. We enjoyed our time together. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, we sat on the porch. Jack put his arm around me and I leaned into him. "Despite everything with Mom and the drama, I feel lucky we have each other," I said, looking at the fading light. "We're about to start this amazing new chapter, and I think it's going to be great." Jack kissed the top of my head. "It will be. We've got this, Julie." As night fell and Dad said his goodbyes, I felt a deep sense of contentment and readiness for the future. The challenges with Mom and the uncertainty of new beginnings had been tough, but they had led me to this moment, surrounded by love and support.
The moving van sat idled by the curb, its rear door gaping open like a hungry maw. I stared in disbelief as the last remnants of my life were carted out of the house I had called home for 30 years. "What is going on here?" I demanded, hands trembling as I gripped the strap of my purse. Elliot turned towards me, his expression one of feigned surprise. The smug grin tugging at the corners of his mouth said it all. He knew exactly what he was doing. "Harper, you're back early," he said coolly, stuffing his hands into the pockets of his chinos. I bristled at his casual tone. "Don't Harper me. What have you done?" Before he could respond, a lilting voice cut through the tension. "There you are, Elliot, darling." A statuesque blonde in a ridiculously short sundress slinked up beside him, looping her arm through his. My stomach twisted into a knot as her identity became clear. Marla, Elliot's mistress from the office, the one he had sworn was ancient history. I should have known better than to trust his lies. You sold our home? I choked out the words, praying this was some cruel joke. After everything we've been through together? Elliot opened his mouth, but I barreled on, anger and hurt swelling within me. The sacrifices I made when your business failed, caring for your awful mother when she fell ill, pouring my life into this house, into our marriage. I was nearly shouting now, hot tears streaking my cheeks. Marla wrapped her arms around Elliot in a sickening display of possession. Don't get hysterical, Harper. It's just business. Just business. After 30 years of partnership, of struggling and persevering side by side, he was tossing me aside like a used rag. For her. I rounded on Elliot, squaring my shoulders. You lying, cheating snake, you're willing to destroy everything we built together for this? Elliot avoided my gaze, the muscles in his jaw twitching. He knew he had been caught red-handed in his web of deceit. The seconds ticked by in silence, the only sound the sudden clatter as the movers heaved the last of our belongings into the van. It was really happening. The man I had loved and trusted above all else had betrayed me in the cruelest way imaginable. Marla sneered at me over Elliot's shoulder. Time to move on, Harper. This is our new beginning. Their smugness was more than I could bear. Squaring my shoulders, I jutted my chin defiantly at the pair. You want a new beginning? Fine, but mark my words, this isn't over. Turning on my heel, I stalked away from the home I had poured my heart and soul into, leaving the shattered remains of my marriage behind. The game was on. Elliot and his mistress had started a war, and I would be damned if I went down without a fight. I barely slept that night, that the image of Elliot smugly carrying on with his mistress scorched into my mind. How could the man I had loved, the father of my children, be so callous and cruel? My anger simmered as I paced the guest room of Alex's apartment, the temporary living situation doing nothing to soften the sting of Elliot's betrayal. I had given that man everything, my unwavering support through hard times, my love and loyalty for 3 decades. And this was how he repaid me? The shrill ring of my cell phone sliced through the tense silence. Jenna's name flashed across the screen. Mom? Her voice wobbled with unshed tears. Is it true what Alex told me? Dad left you for some young thing? My chest tightened. Having to explain this nightmare to my children was almost worse than living through it myself. They had always looked up to their father, despite his litany of shortcomings over the years. I'm so sorry, honey. Your father and we're getting divorced. I cringed at how matter-of-fact the words sounded, like I was reporting groceries rather than the imminent dissolution of my marriage. Angry silence crackled down the line. When Jenna spoke again, her tone was low and uncompromising. That selfish bastard, after everything you sacrificed for him and this family? She broke off in a choked sob. Mom, I'm coming over. We're going to get through this together. Thank you, sweetie, I murmured, feeling a surge of pride at my daughter's fierce loyalty. At least I could count on my children, despite their father's despicable actions. A few hours later, Jenna burst into the apartment, red-faced and bristling. Alex sat slouched on the sofa, his expression one of carefully restrained rage. That low-life piece of scum, Jenna spat, flinging herself into the armchair beside me, throwing away 30 years of marriage for a cheap fling? Unfreaking believable. Jenna, Alex warned in a low voice. No, Alex, I won't stay quiet. He humiliated Mom in the worst way. She wheeled towards me, eyes blazing. Please tell me you're taking him for every last penny. I studied my daughter's fierce protectiveness and loyalty, my heart swelling despite the misery of my circumstances. This was the family I cared about, the ones who had my back no matter what. Squaring my shoulders, I returned Jenna's determined stare. You're damn right I am. If that rat bastard Elliot thinks he can just discard me and our marriage, he has another thing coming. My gaze slid towards Alex, who gave a somber nod of agreement. A muscle twitched in his clenched jaw. We're with you every step of the way, Mom. Just let us know whatever you need. In that moment, I felt a surge of resolve. Elliot and his mistress had detonated a bomb that shattered my life into pieces, but if he thought I would go down without a fight, he was gravely mistaken. It was time to show my soon-to-be ex-husband exactly why hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Squaring my shoulders, I looked my children in the eyes. Here's what we're going to do. The divorce proceedings were uglier than I could have imagined. Elliot fought me tooth and nail, contesting everything from asset division to alimony. His smug arrogance in the courtroom made my blood boil. Your Honor, my client has devoted her entire adult life to supporting Mr. Monroe's endeavors, often at great personal cost, my lawyer argued, throwing a pointed look at Elliot. She put her career on hold to raise their children, manage the household, and provide emotional support through failed business ventures. She is more than entitled to an equitable share of the marital assets. Elliot's eyes narrowed into serpentine slits. That condescending sneer I knew all too well twisted his lips. He seemed to forget I sat just a few feet away, watching his every arrogant micro-expression. With all due respect, his lawyer oozed, Mr. Monroe's recent financial windfall stems from the prudent sale of the marital home he purchased prior to the marriage. My client's new business partner, he threw a deferential nod at that blonde bimbo Marla, simply provided the funds to unlock the asset's latent value. Mrs. Monroe's demands are exorbitant given her minimal contributions. You lying sack of scum, I mentally hurled at my soon-to-be ex-husband. I burned with impotent rage, wanting nothing more than to hurl the nearest heavy object at his insufferably smug face. The arrogance. To dismiss 3 decades of selfless partnership, putting his wants ahead of my own dreams, raising our children almost single-handedly, and dragging his worthless carcass back from the brink of financial ruin as minimal contributions. White-hot fury lanced through me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Alex leaning forward, his hands knotted into white-knuckled fists atop his knees. Jenna put a calming hand on his arm, her own eyes glinting with outrage. Mom's the one who kept this family afloat while you were off chasing yet another get-rich-quick scheme, Alex hissed under his breath, low enough for just me to hear. Don't you dare try to rewrite history in that condescending way. I squeezed his hand in gratitude, stoking the fires of my own resolve. We had fought too hard, sacrificed too much of our lives, to let Elliot sweep it all under the rug now. If he thought I would go down without a fight, he had underestimated the wrong woman. The following days and weeks were consumed by a whirlwind of paperwork and legal appointments. With Alex and Jenna's assistance, I pored over financial statements, compiled records, and documented everything. No stone was left unturned. Gone were the days of meekly accepting Elliot's decisions, of surrendering pieces of myself for his desires and ego. I would expose every lie, every despicable act for the world to see. Elliot Monroe was about to learn a brutal lesson. You didn't get to spend 30 years leeching off a spouse's sacrifices and loyalty, discarding them like a used rag for your own selfish gratification without suffering immense consequences. Not on my watch. It was a new day. Armed with evidence and sheer determination, I was finally taking control of my destiny. Elliot's reckoning was coming, and nothing would stand in my way. The Westbrook Charity Gala was usually the highlight of my social calendar, a chance to dress up, rub elbows with the town's elite, and raise money for good causes. This year, my motivations were decidedly different. From the moment I arrived, eyes followed me like hawks, whispers rippling through the crowd. Word of Elliot's scandalous betrayal had spread like wildfire thanks to the divorce proceedings. My cheeks burned, but I lifted my chin defiantly, gliding across the marble floor with practiced grace. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted them. Elliot looking disarmingly handsome in his tuxedo, with that blonde bimbo Marla draped over his arm like a damn trophy. She stuck out like a sore thumb in that garish red dress that clung inappropriately to every curve. My fists clenched involuntarily at my sides. How dare they show their faces here after demolishing everything we'd built? The sheer arrogance of it made my blood boil. Elliot caught my withering stare and quickly averted his eyes, suddenly finding the crystal chandelier overhead fascinating. Good, let the craven weasel squirm under my gaze for once. Marla, however, sneered back at me, her scarlet lips curving into a mocking smile as she ran her ringed fingers along Elliot's arm in a possessive display. My jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. The MC's voice abruptly boomed from the speakers, beckoning everyone to their seats for the program's commencement. I took a fortifying breath, smoothing my hands over my evening gown. It was now or never. Abandoning my usual table, I weaved through the clusters of impeccably dressed guests until I stood front and center on the stage, microphone in hand. "Good evening, everyone," I began in a tone of forced civility. "As you all may know, I'm going through a difficult transition in my personal life currently." Elliot went rigid in his seat, realization dawning across his features. Marla's eyes narrowed to serpentine slits, her over-glossed lips parting in outrage. My voice carried flawlessly to every corner of the vaulted ballroom. My husband of 30 years has chosen to abandoning our marriage vows, our family, and everything we built together in pursuit of. I threw Marla a pointed look, more self-indulgent desires. A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd like a Mexican wave. Elliot's ruddy face colored even further under the spotlight's glare. While I'm sure he and his new associate are quite proud of their clandestine dalliances, I wouldn't feel right letting such a prominent member of our community get away with such appalling deceptions. Marla shot to her feet, perfectly plucked eyebrows slanted furiously over her pale blue eyes. "How dare you drag us through the mud this way?" she shouted, planting her hands on her canted hips. "This is low, even for you." A vindicated smirk tugged at my lips. "Low?" I echoed over the crowd's stunned gasps. "Low is cheating on your wife of 3 decades and abandoning your family for a cheap fling. Low is lying, gaslighting, and manipulating those closest to you for your own selfish appetites." I leveled my gaze at Marla and the pinched, crimson-faced Elliot behind her. "No, revealing the unvarnished truth about your contemptible actions. That is justice. Maybe next time you'll both think twice before carelessly destroying human lives in pursuit of your transient desires." Turning on my heel, I surrendered the stage to thunderous applause and whistles, watching in satisfaction as Elliot buried his flaming face in his hands. The gloves were off. In front of the entire town, I had drawn the battle lines. Let the war begin. The gavel struck the wooden sound block with a decisive thump, echoing through the courtroom. My hands trembled as Judge Reynolds cleared his throat, shuffling through the stack of documents on his bench. In the matter of the divorce proceedings between Harper Monroe and Elliot Monroe, his voice carried the weight of finality. Elliot sat ramrod straight beside his lawyer, his expression unreadable. I forced myself to meet his gaze, letting none of the turbulent mix of anger, grief, and vindication roiling inside me show. After months of vicious legal battles, falsified financial records, and levels of deception I'd never imagined possible from the man I once loved, it all came down to this moment. My grip tightened around the armrests until my knuckles shone bone white. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, I thereby order Mr. Monroe to pay Mrs. Monroe a lump sum of $4 million. The judge's ruling sliced through the thick tension like a hot knife. In addition, Mrs. Monroe shall receive 60% of the liquid assets and investment portfolios accumulated during the marriage. A guttural sound of disbelief escaped Elliot's lips. His rictus mask of composure finally shattered, giving way to flushed, impotent rage. "Suck on that, you arrogant prick," I mentally hurled at him. Furthermore, Judge Reynolds spoke over Elliot's sputtering, "Mrs. Monroe is awarded full ownership of the Monroe residence on Summit Hill Road, free and clear of all liens or encumbrances." My heart stuttered in my chest as the enormity hit me. He was giving me back the home Elliot had so gleefully sold out from under me. Our home, the place we had raised our children and built a life together for 30 years, would remain mine. Tears of sheer relief and vindication pricked my eyes. Alex squeezed my hand tightly beside me, a proud smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "That lying snake got exactly what he deserved," he murmured under his breath. Jenna leaned across him and enveloped me in a fierce hug, openly weeping tears of joy. Beyond them, Elliot sat utterly motionless, his face drained of all color. The full weight of his actions had finally caught up with him. As I strode triumphantly from the courtroom to raucous cheers and applause from my friends and supporters, I was vividly reminded of the scorpion and frog fable. Elliot had thoughtlessly stung me, his faithful partner who carried him across the tumultuous waters of life, and now he would drown in the consequences of his treachery. But I intended to do more than simply survive his betrayal. With this ruling, I had been afforded a new lease on life, a chance to heal, to rebuild, and to pursue all the hopes and dreams I had put on hold for that ungrateful bastard. And I would be damned if I didn't take this second chance and run with it full throttle. 6 weeks later, I stood in the marble foyer of my reacquired home, drinking in the warm, familiar surroundings as the moving crew unloaded my belongings. The mover grunts and thuds providing a stark counterpoint to the eerie silence and memories that hung thick in the air. This place had been the backdrop to my once happy marriage, the birthplace of cherished family memories, unbreakable bonds between husband and wife, and dreams of growing old together. Elliot's lies and callous greed had very nearly ripped it all away. But not anymore. Tilting my chin up, I surveyed the cavernous front room, envisioning the fresh start taking shape before me. This house, this life, belonged solely to me and my children now. The shackles of deception and manipulation were finally severed. It was time to reclaim my dignity, my identity, and take that first defiant step into my bold new chapter. Just when I thought I was finally free of Elliot's treachery, the other shoe dropped with a sickening thud. "You're doing what?" I sputtered, gaping at Jenna over the breakfast bar. She slid a sleek brochure across the granite countertop toward me with a grim look. "Dad and Marla are opening up some sort of luxury bed and breakfast." My stomach twisted into a queasy knot as I scanned the high-gloss photos advertising their premier inn and chateau in a pristine mountain setting. I could only imagine how much of my divorce settlement went into funding this mockery. "That arrogant son of a bitch," I hissed under my breath. "The place opens in 3 months," Jenna continued, fire blazing behind her eyes. "Using the cash he swindled from selling our home, no less." Bitter bile burned the back of my throat. Of course that weasel Elliot wouldn't be content until he'd twisted the knife one last time, flaunting his ill-gotten trophy acquisition in a lavish new business venture. It was the ultimate insult. In that fateful moment, something inside me hardened like carbon under immense pressure. Elliot had made his move, ramming home just how little our marriage and my sacrifices had ever meant. The gloves were officially off. "You know what?" I said, looking up at Jenna with a steely determination. "Two can play at this game." Over the next couple weeks, I quietly put my business skills to work. Between the millions from my divorce settlement, unbridled passion, and an unquenchable drive to crush Elliot once and for all, those old familiar thrills of strategizing and building something from the ground up reignited hot in my veins. Before long, the pieces fell into place with impeccable precision. The perfect location secured, permits and licenses filed, and employees hired. Elliot's smug comeuppance had become my singular obsession. Of course, I kept the entire operation strictly under wraps, waiting for the perfect opportunity to skin the cat. That chance arose when Alex called me with a frantic update. "Mom, you'll never guess what. They invited us to some big launch party for their stupid inn." Elliot and his mistress, foolishly dangling their bait. I could taste the sweet promise of revenge on my tongue. "Did they now?" I purred into the phone. My son's confusion was palpable. 2 weeks later, Elliot and I stood amidst the opulent trappings of his Monroe Inn and Resort launch gala. With a bored flick of the champagne flute, I signaled Alex to join us by the towering picture windows. Elliot's serpentine gaze immediately narrowed with displeasure, so predictable. "I must congratulate you both on this quaint establishment," I began. My tone dripped with sugary condescension. Marla bristled, straightening the tight bodice of her obscene cocktail dress. "Why, Harper, how big of you to join our celebration." Elliot merely stared at me, dumbfounded. "Although, I can't help feeling it's missing something." I paused dramatically, watching fresh color bloom across his cheeks. "Some competition, if you will, to keep you on your toes." "Competition?" His voice finally barked out a brusque response. "What the devil are you talking about?" With a serene smile, I looped my arm through Alex's elbow. "Why don't I show you both instead?" We swept through the ballroom, Elliot and his trampy mistress gawking like hooked fish at our heels. A bank of French doors waited at the opposite end, where the remainder of my crew hovered in anticipation. "Elliot, Marla, welcome to the grand opening of the Chateau Sophia." At my signal, the doors swung wide, revealing the sprawling vista of the property I had meticulously assembled to be bigger, bolder, and infinitely more upscale than their paltry imitation. Their jaws dropped in horror at the sight. You didn't really think I was going to let you prance around with my life's work unchallenged, did you? My eyes glittered with malicious glee. As my new employees swarmed the terrace behind me, a messenger arrived with urgent news for Elliot. His backers were pulling funding over the 11th hour competition. The arrogant blowhard gaped at me, the color rapidly draining from his blustered features. I offered a mocking toast of my champagne glass. To new beginnings, darling. Welcome to the hospitality wars. The opening months of the Chateau Sophia could hardly have gone better. Our elegant, rustic chic accommodations and curated experiences were an immediate hit, drawing rave reviews and becoming the area's hottest destination. In stark contrast, Elliot's half-baked Monroe Inn and Resort limped along in obscurity. Their online listings were littered with scathing critiques, shabby decor, subpar amenities, and painfully amateurish service chief among the complaints. Seeing that arrogant blowhard receive his long-overdue comeuppance was more satisfying than I could have possibly imagined. Each scathing review, every vacant room, and negative press mention further cemented his colossal failures as both a businessman and human being. Every few weeks, I would gather my team for an all-hands meeting to align our strategy. More than once, Elliot's petty attempts at sabotaging my operations through underhanded tactics were uncovered and swiftly neutralized. The bastard tried bribing the Campbell family to leave us a scathing review, Renee, my operations lead, told me one afternoon. A contemptuous sneer twisted her lips, as if a wealthy clan like that would ever sully their reputation for a few measly bucks. I waved a dismissive hand, hiding my vindicated smirk behind a sip of coffee. That's just how low Elliot will stoop. He's flailing desperately to stay afloat, but it won't be enough. Sure enough, it was barely 2 months into our heated battle for hospitality supremacy that the unraveling began. Rumor had it, Elliot was hemorrhaging cash at an unsustainable clip, having wildly underestimated startup costs and failing to gain a foothold in the market. When the foreclosure notices started appearing in the local paper's legal announcements, I couldn't resist a wry smile of triumph. Textbook overconfident arrogance, bulldozing ahead without doing his due diligence. It was so quintessentially Elliot. Later that week, Alex forwarded me a scathing article about the pending closure of the Monroe Inn. Turns out Elliot had stopped paying vendors, staff, and underlying creditors in a desperate bid to keep the facade going. His investors, those few who hadn't already pulled their funding, were going to get hosed. The comments section was a virtual bonfire of schadenfreude, with locals and former patrons alike torching Elliot for his litany of failures. Just desserts for such a prolific liar and cheat. Not long after, I found myself across the polished alderwood desk from the one and only Elliot Monroe. He was noticeably haggard, the last bastions of his smarmy confidence crumbling under the crushing weight of his debacle. I'm destitute, Harper, he admitted in a hoarse tone, unable to meet my unblinking stare. The business, the investors, it's all gone belly up. I have nothing. The disgraced charlatan finally confessing the depths of his depravity should have felt enormously vindicating. Instead, I just felt hollow, numb to the man whose betrayal had nearly decimated my soul. After everything you did to me, to us, I murmured, gesturing between us. Did you really think I was just going to roll over and let you win? His jaw clenched, tendons straining beneath his ruddy skin. I leaned forward, holding his gaze with steely determination. Wake up and face reality, Elliot. You're an arrogant, insecure little man whose own reprehensible actions orchestrated this downfall. All I did was give you the chance to reap what you've sown. My office abruptly felt too small, the air heavy with decades of simmering resentments. This confrontation had been a long time coming. Please. The broken whisper escaped Elliot's lips. I waited for the rest, but he seemed to shrink further in on himself, deflating like an untied balloon. In that moment, I realized just how profoundly over him I was. The man had gambled away my love, my loyalty, our life, for his own selfish cravings. He deserved no more of my energy or power. Rising to my feet, I smoothed my hands over my skirt and crossed to the door. I'm afraid there's nothing left to say. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. As Elliot slunk from the office in disgrace, I felt an unfurling sense of finality. Whatever puppet strings had still bound me were severed. My karma delivered. his miserable fate sealed. It was a new beginning in the truest sense. And I had miles more to go before reaching my final form. The warm summer breeze carried the fragrance of freshly bloomed roses and honeysuckle as I stood on the terrace, surveying my personal oasis. After more than a year of stratospheric success with the Chateau Sophia, I had seized the opportunity to expand into a full-service luxury resort and spa. My staff bustled about in crisp uniforms, meticulously prepping for the grand opening gala. Lanterns were strung between marble columns, and sleek white cabanas dotted the immaculate grounds. I inhaled deeply, savoring the sweet air and sense of peaceful accomplishment. This night marked the culmination of a years-long journey, one driven by sheer determination to not just survive betrayal, but to thrive in defiance of it. "It's really something, huh, Mom?" Alex's voice shook me from my reverie. I turned to find him beaming with pride, Jenna looped through his arm in a chic sundress. Despite the years and tumult we'd endured, my children still stood staunchly by my side. "You've built an amazing legacy, one we're all so proud of," Jenna gushed. Emotion swelled in my throat as I pulled them both into a fierce embrace. Just a couple years ago, our family had been in tatters, each of us suffering the devastating blows of Elliot's callous betrayal. We never could have imagined coming out on the other side like this. "I couldn't have done any of this without you two," I said gruffly, blinking back happy tears. "Your love and support gave me the strength to keep going, no matter what." We stood together in comfortable silence, cherishing the profoundly transformed trajectory of our lives. The agonizing days of despair and hurt were finally behind us. A gentle rap on the terrace doors signaled an arrival. I turned to find Justin, the new director of hospitality operations, hovering with an uncertain look. "Apologies for interrupting, Mrs. Monroe, but he's here, asking for you." My stomach clenched instinctively. I already knew who the he in question was. Taking a steadying breath, I nodded for Justin to send him out. No more than a minute later, the terrace doors parted, revealing a shrunken, haggard figure that had once been Elliot Monroe. His expensive suit hung loosely on his diminished frame, his eyes downcast and swallowed by deep hollows. To put it plainly, he looked utterly, irrevocably broken. "Elliot," I greeted with cool detachment, nodding to Jenna and Alex. To their credit, they restrained themselves from any outbursts, simply watching on in stone-faced silence. "Harper, he began, words failing him as his mouth worked soundlessly. With visible effort, he met my gaze, shame and regret etched into the weathered lines of his face. "I just wanted to see the spectacular woman you've become with my own eyes. The strength, the success. You've cemented an enduring legacy while I squandered my own." His laugh was a dejected, hollow rasp. "I gambled away the love of my life, my family, in pursuit of cheap vices and ego strokes. A bigger fool has never walked this earth." My first instinct was to rebuff his pathetic wallowing, to dismiss him as easily as swatting a fly, but some deeper pang of crushed hopes gave me pause. Maybe in another life, another reality where he made different choices, things could have turned out so differently for us. But that path was forever closed to him now, his misery entirely self-wrought. "You're right about one thing," I said after a loaded pause. "This life, this empire, is mine now. One I built from the ashes of the world you burnt to the ground." Elliot staggered back slightly, absorbing the weight of my condemnation. "But I won't have you polluting it with your boorishness any longer," I continued, mustering every fiber of dignity. "Tonight, I'm surrounded by the people who matter most, my loyal family, my driven team, my esteemed guests. You've been excised from this existence entirely." I pierced him with a final, unwavering stare. "Now, get off my property before I have security remove you." Without another word, the shell of the man who had once been my husband turned and shambled away in disgrace. A profound sense of closure blossomed within me as I watched him disappear into the gloaming. At long last, I had severed the final tether binding me to my anguished past. Ahead lay an open field of possibility, and a hard-won second chance to cultivate the life I deserved. A new chapter was finally beginning. The incessant pounding at the door jolted me awake. I glanced at the clock. 11:37 p.m. Fear crept in as I clutched my robe, tiptoeing down the stairs. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaky. "Grandma, it's us! Please open up!" Two small voices pierced through the howling wind and pelting rain. I swung the door open to find my grandsons, Alex and Caleb, drenched and shivering on my doorstep. Caleb clung to a crumpled piece of paper in his tiny fist. "Boys? What on earth?" My words caught in my throat as I ushered them inside, wrapping them in thick towels. "Mom, she left us at the park," Alex said between chattering teeth. "She told us to come here." Caleb shakily held up the note. "Read it, Grandma." My hands trembled as I smoothed out the soggy paper. 5 scrawled words made my heart plummet. "Take them to Grandma's house." Jenna's looping cursive mocked me from the page. How could she abandon her own children like this? "I'm so sorry, boys," I whispered, pulling them into a fierce embrace. Caleb's little body shook with sobs. "You're safe now. I've got you." I marched them upstairs, bundling them into warm pajamas. Haunted eyes followed my every move as they huddled on the guest bed. "Will Mom come back for us?" Caleb asked, his voice tiny and fragile. I froze, unsure how to respond. After everything she'd put them through, would Jenna really want them back? Swallowing hard, I gently brushed Caleb's damp curls from his forehead. "We'll figure this out tomorrow. Tonight, you just need to rest." Alex remained stoic, clenching his jaw to mask the fear flickering in his eyes. At 10 years old, he tried so hard to be the brave one. As I settled into the armchair beside their bed, their shuddering breaths slowed into the peaceful rhythm of sleep. Yet haunting questions whirled in my mind, dark memories stirring. My relationship with Jenna had been fraught from the beginning. The sweet, loving girl my son Derek fell for vanished after their wedding, replaced by someone manipulative and cold-hearted. Still, she was their mother. What desperation could drive a parent to abandon their own flesh and blood? A gnawing suspicion took root. This was about more than just bad parenting. Staring at my grandson's sleeping forms, their cheeks still glistening with drying tears, a fierce protectiveness burned within me. I would get to the bottom of Jenna's deceit, whatever it took. For now they were home, they were safe, and I would do everything in my power to ensure it stayed that way. As the first pale rays peeked through the curtains, I allowed my eyes to drift shut, steeling myself for the maelstrom ahead. The shrill trill of the phone jolted me awake at the crack of dawn. I immediately tensed, scanning the bed. Relief washed over me as I saw Alex and Caleb huddled together, still slumbering peacefully. "Hello?" I whispered, padding out of the room. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is Sheriff Davis. We received a troubling report last night from a family at Oak Ridge Park." My stomach twisted into knots as the sheriff proceeded to recount how a hysterical Jenna had shown up in the middle of the night, rambling about voices telling her to hurt the boys. She'd fled before the cops arrived, leaving Alex and Caleb alone on a rain-soaked park bench. "We've been searching all night, but there's no sign of her." His gruff voice softened. "I know you two had your differences, but are the boys safe with you?" Squeezing my eyes shut, I managed a tight nod before realizing he couldn't see me. Yes, they're here, safe and sound." After ending the call, my hands trembled as I glimpsed the shredded remnants of my tranquil, retired life around me. How could Jenna put her own sons through such trauma? I hurried back to the bedroom, my heart clenching at the sight of them cuddled together like orphaned kittens. Jenna's depraved actions were utterly unforgivable, but what terrified me most was the possibility of far deeper depravities lurking beneath the surface. Voices telling her to hurt them, or her own twisted thoughts whirling out of control. Over the next few days, I discreetly made inquiries around town, desperate for any clues that could shed light on the dark path Jenna had ventured down. What I uncovered made my blood run cold. "She's lost her mind, plain and simple," Derek's old friend Mitch grimly told me one afternoon while I had the boys occupied playing in the backyard. "Got mixed up with some real nasty people, from what I gathered." My heart pounded as Mitch detailed rumors of shady business deals, illicit money trails, and unsettling new acquaintances in Jenna's life. "They're saying she did things, illegal things, to keep the cash flowing after Derek." He shook his grizzled head sadly. After Derek's death in that horrific car crash 6 months ago, Jenna had rapidly changed, staying out at all hours, dressing in ostentatious new clothes, and lavishly showering the boys with toys and gifts she couldn't afford on a widow's pension. The picture grew exponentially uglier the more I unearthed. Theft, embezzlement, fraud, No depravity seemed off-limits in Jenna's warped quest for wealth and status. And at the center of this web of lies and immorality were my beloved grandsons, forced to fend for themselves as collateral damage while their own mother indulged her demons. One night after the boys were tucked in, I stood at the bay window, staring out at the inky darkness. "I will burn it all down to ashes if I have to," I murmured in a voice that chilled even me. "She won't go unpunished for this, not on my watch." The wheels were in motion to expose the full extent of Jenna's deception. I could only pray I wasn't too late to protect Alex and Caleb from the worst of the fallout. The rusty hinges of the attic door protested as I pulled it down, thick dust motes swirling in the beam of my flashlight. I couldn't recall the last time I'd ventured up here. After Derek's passing, any reminders were too agonizing. But to have a prayer of protecting Alex and Caleb from Jenna's toxicity, I needed to understand how we'd arrived at this catastrophic juncture. So I steeled myself and climbed the creaky ladder. Coughing through the musty air, I aimed my light across a maze of boxes and trunks packed with decades of memories. My gaze snagged on a crooked stack of faded photo albums. With a lump in my throat, I sank onto the dusty floor, pulling them into my lap one by one. Smiling faces of happier times beamed back at me. An 8-year-old Derek, freckles dancing across his nose as he grinned at the camera on his Little League baseball team's picture day. High school graduation, his lanky frame dwarfing that ridiculous maroon cap and gown. Our tight-knit trio on my front porch after he'd moved into his first college dorm room, already looking so grown up. My chest ached as I drank in every moment, unable to fathom how that sweet, vibrant boy had become the haggard, haunted man who ultimately couldn't outrun his demons. Then the photos shifted. Derek's energetic smile remained, but his arm was slung around a pretty blonde girl with an equally megawatt grin. Jenna. I'll never forget the day he arrived home from university on Christmas break, hands trembling with poorly disguised excitement as he introduced us to his new girlfriend. How her dimpled cheeks and sparkling eyes instantly camouflaged the punkish, asymmetrical haircut and bare midriff that made me inwardly cringe. "She's the one, Mom." Derek had whispered to me in the kitchen that night as she dazzled my husband with some anecdote about hitchhiking through Amsterdam one summer. I know it seems crazy since we've only been dating for a few months, but she's my soulmate. Part of me wanted to bundle him back into his Star Wars sheets from childhood and never let him go. But I couldn't ignore the sheer incandescence radiating from my typically brooding son. So I smiled and welcomed Jenna into our family with open arms. How I lived to regret that decision. The subsequent albums told a heartbreaking tale, one of increasing loneliness on Derek's face as the wattage on Jenna's dimmed through their wedding portraits and into the first couple years of their marriage. Finally, I flipped to the last few pages and recoiled. Here were my grandsons, capturing in wide grins and crinkled nose giggles. But the woman beside them was utterly unrecognizable. Cold, hollow eyes bored into the camera. Painted smiles slashed across her taut face with all the authenticity of a circus clown. Where had my sweet, goofy Jenna gone? The one who taught me how to twerk at their engagement party? The girl who threatened to burn her eyebrows off while helping me make adorable, succulent pumpkin centerpieces for their fall wedding? Slapping the album shut, I shuddered as the revelations washed over me. Jenna's betrayal of Derek ran even deeper than I could have imagined. She'd sucked the very light and joy from his spirit long before his tragic demise last year. I swiped at the heated tears streaking my cheeks as a grim calm settled over me. Whatever drove Jenna to her current depths of immorality, her own children would not be her next victims. Not if I had any say in the matter. "This is ridiculous. You can't keep my children from me." Jenna's shrill voice sliced through the diner's murmured chatter like fingernails on a chalkboard. I stiffened as she stormed up to our booth, eyes wild and knuckles blanched from clutching her purse strap. Alex and Caleb instantly shrank back against the cracked vinyl seat. Caleb whimpered, and I instinctively tugged them closer under the safety of my arms. "Don't you dare upset them further," I warned in a low tone. "The boys are terrified of you, Jenna, and after what you pulled, can you blame them?" Her lips curled into an ugly sneer. "Oh, so you've turned them against their own mother? That's rich, coming from the woman who poisoned Derek against me for years." I opened my mouth to retort, but she cut me off with a harsh laugh. Save your breath, Lorraine. I want full custody, effective immediately. If you don't hand them over willingly, I'll take you to court and make you regret the day you ever met me. Shaking her head slowly, she leveled me with a chilling glare. Mark my words, you won't be able to protect them forever. With that ominous vow hanging in the air, she spun on her spiked heel and stormed out, leaving us all shaken. I clutched the boys tighter, feeling their tiny bodies trembling against mine. They shouldn't have to endure this trauma, not from the person who was supposed to nurture and safeguard them. When we returned home, Sheriff Davis was waiting on the front porch, hands shoved in his pockets. We finally got to the bottom of what Jenna's been up to, he said grimly, and it's not good. My heart plummeted as he recounted a twisted web of fraud, theft, and money laundering, all stemming from Jenna's efforts to siphon funds from Derek's life insurance payout after his death. She set up shell companies, forged documents, you name it, the sheriff said, shaking his grizzled head. From what we can gather, her crazy behavior was all an act. A way to get the boys out of her hair so she could pull off this whole scam undetected. White-hot fury blazed through me at the thought of her using our sweet grandsons as disposable pawns in her greed-fueled games. I wanted to scream, to hurl plates at the wall, to unleash the pure, primal rage burning in my veins. But I couldn't. Not with those two sets of fearful eyes, watching my every move, clinging to me as their solitary beacon of stability. So I inhaled a slow, steadying breath. Whatever Jenna's motivations, she's proven herself an unfit parent who's put them in danger. I want full legal custody. Relief flickered across the sheriff's face. I'll make sure our case against her is airtight. You just focus on taking care of those boys. He started toward his cruiser, then paused. And Lorraine, if she tries anything else, you let me know immediately. You hear? I offered a terse nod, then scooped Alex and Caleb into my arms, their small bodies melting into my embrace like they'd never let go. Jenna could hurl whatever malicious threats she desired. I didn't care about her con artist scheming or her vile machinations to line her pockets with my son's hard-earned money. All I cared about were these two precious souls who had already witnessed and endured far too much in their young lives. They were my entire world now. And if Jenna delusionally thought I'd relinquish them without a brutal fight to the death, she was soon to be rudely awakened. So you're really going to fight me on this? Jenna's derisive laugh crackled through the phone line. You senile old bat. I'll bury you. I clutched the receiver tighter, struggling against the flood of rage testing my restraint. If you think I'll let you within a mile of those boys after what you've done, you're delirious. We'll see about that. The smug venom in her tone made my skin crawl. My lawyer is prepping an ironclad case as we speak. You might have been able to manipulate the local cops, but I'd like to see you talk your way out of this in an actual courtroom. The line went dead with an ominous click. I slowly returned the phone to its cradle, steadying my ragged breaths. I'd expected Jenna's threats, expected the nasty accusations and diversionary tactics in a desperate attempt to regain control of her twisted game. But her arrogance made one fatal miscalculation. She had severely underestimated the resolve of a lifelong educator pushed to her limits. As the morning light filtered through the curtains, I studied the two tow-headed figures sprawled across the guest bed, in a jumble of sheets and gangly limbs. Bruises and scrapes mottled their arms, remnants of being abandoned in the park like unwanted pound puppies. But their cherubic faces were finally relaxed in peaceful slumber, no longer etched with fear and uncertainty. In that moment, I vowed to do whatever was required to preserve this newfound serenity they so desperately craved, which meant playing Jenna's macabre game, and beating her at it without hesitation. I strode into the study and booted up my laptop, fingers flying across the keys as I toggled between search engine results for top private investigators near me and local family law attorneys with stellar custody case track records. Time was of the essence if I wanted to mount an unshakable offensive before Jenna beat me to the courtroom battlefield. 2 phone calls and a hurried conference later, and I'd assembled an elite cadre of legal warriors ready to dismantle whatever vitriolic crusade Jenna tried to wage. We're going to rip her facade to shreds from every angle, Annalise, the razor-sharp family law specialist, assured me over steaming mugs of coffee. Money trails, witness statements, a full forensic analysis of her involvement in your son's death. She won't know what hit her. The other woman, Mei Ling, was one of the area's most sought-after private eyes, having cracked countless high-stakes cases with her enigmatic brand of perception and grit. Her obsidian eyes glinted with determination. I already have leads indicating Jenna's scam goes far deeper than just fraud. We're talking organized crime rings, money laundering operations spanning multiple states. There's a good chance she had Derek killed to inherit those insurance funds. A collective chill reverberated around the table. I slowly lifted my gaze, feeling their scrutiny. I don't care what stones need to be upturned or what vermin you need to smoke out, I stated with flinty resolve. That thing is not going to terrorize my grandsons any longer. I want her exposed for the vile, heartless snake she is, and I want those boys to feel safe again. Mei Ling and Annalise exchanged weighted looks before giving terse nods of understanding. We knew the battle lines had been drawn, and all bets were officially off. Jenna wanted to sick her high-priced legal team on me? Let her wage her war. Little did she know I relished the chance to go nuclear if pushed. And I hadn't survived 5 decades as an inner-city educator by playing nice with bullies. The tension in the cramped courthouse conference room was thicker than New England clam chowder. I could barely meet the clouded gazes of the disheveled strangers flanking my sides, members of the jury still reeling from the bombshell revelations. Jenna attempted a sickly sweet smile as she rose from the table, emaciated frame swimming in her designer pantsuit. But the wanton arrogance that usually dripped from her had been extinguished, replaced by the skittish panic of a rat in a trap. I kept my own expression steeled and impassive, fighting against the savage curl of satisfaction in my gut. We weren't quite at checkmate yet. Let's be reasonable here, she began in that saccharine lilt that used to grate my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. I never meant for things to go this far. You all have to believe I only wanted what was best for my children. Mei Ling made a derisive noise beside me, thumbing through the damning evidence portfolio. Photos of money trails and encrypted communications between Jenna and a notorious cartel kingpin. Ballistics reports tying the revolver used to kill Derek to one of the mobster's henchmen. A chilling CCTV clip capturing Jenna's vehicle leaving the scene of the accident, moments after Derek's truck plunged over the ravine. Is that so? Mei Ling arched one sculpted eyebrow. Because these financial ledgers suggest you spent over $2 million on designer handbags, high-stakes gambling jaunts to Monaco, and a literal palace in the Dominican Republic, all from the insurance payout after murdering your own husband. Jenna's mask faltered, replacing the sugary syrup with a hiss of venom. You self-righteous vultures wouldn't understand. I was trapped in a loveless marriage, taken for granted at every turn. I deserved those things. You deserve to leave your children orphaned and broke? I growled, unable to contain myself any longer. You deserve to slaughter their father, your own flesh and blood, in cold blood? Stay out of this, you cretinous relic, Jenna spat. I had bigger plans, grander wealth waiting on the horizon. Derek was a stepping stone I needed to discard like all the others before him. Besides, it's not like those boys brought anything positive to my life. A collective shudder reverberated around the room. Even Jenna's own attorneys averted their gazes, disgust etched on their craggy faces. Then I guess they dodged a pretty big bullet by winding up with their grandma instead of an egomaniacal sociopath like you, Mei Ling said, chin raised in defiant contempt. Lurching to her feet, Jenna unleashed the full force of her black rage. Nobody was supposed to dig this deep. How dare you interfere with my destiny? Those brats and their pitiful trust fund were just the tip of the iceberg. She wheeled toward me, eyes wild with madness. I hope you're prepared to suffer, Lorraine. Starting with watching your precious grandsons be stripped away once my associate's on the outside. The gavel cracked down as a hulking bailiff seized Jenna's flailing arms. That's enough, ma'am. You've already dug your grave deeper than hell itself. In the pandemonium, Annalise discreetly slid her hand over my clenched fist under the table. A small, grim smile tugged at her lips. We got her, she murmured, in front of the entire jury. attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering violations, criminal negligence toward minors. The rap sheet goes on and on. By the time we present our closing arguments, she'll be praying to go away for life instead of lethal injection. With dawning realization, I glanced around at the pale, stricken faces of the jurors, middle-class Americans much like myself, looking as if they'd witnessed the devil herself unleashed on their quiet hamlet. Not one semblance of sympathy remained for the raving, unhinged woman being restrained before us. In that surreal moment, the gravity of the victory sank in. My son's legacy had been preserved. My grandchildren had been pried from the clutches of a demonic succubus by the barest margins before it was too late. And the deranged charlatan who almost stole everything from me in her quest for wealth and power would finally be entombed where she belonged, in a cage. As Jenna's unhinged howls receded down the courthouse corridor, I felt the leaden weight of tension slough off my shoulders for the first time in over a year. An era of healing could finally commence. A heavy silence blanketed the courtroom as we reassembled the following day for closing arguments and sentencing. Jenna had been temporarily removed, giving the jurors some respite from her poisonous presence before delivering their verdict. But the tension was still palpable, a suffocating dread that the unthinkable could still transpire and that vile harpy might somehow slither away unscathed. Mei-Ling squeezed my arm as we took our places at the prosecution's table. Just a little while longer. Stay strong. I managed a resolute nod, scanning the crowd until my gaze landed on Alex and Caleb flanked by their court-appointed guardian. Their angelic faces were somber, almost sage-like in their premature hardening against the realities they'd been forced to endure. It fortified my resolve to see this malignancy eradicated from their lives once and for all. They deserved the world, warm homes, unconditional love, blissful days of chasing lightning bugs and jumping into leaf piles. Not this paradigm of toxicity and reckless self-interest. The courtroom fell into a hush as the bailiff escorted Jenna inside, her rail-thin wrists encased in shackles. Our eyes bored into one another, hazel meeting ice blue in a silent clash of wills. "State your final remarks," the judge intoned, his weary tone betraying the aftershocks of the evidence he'd presented over the last several days. Jenna rose on shaky legs, painted lips pursing into a defiant sneer. "I have no final remarks, aside from the fact that this biased, uncultured backwater of a town has no comprehension of the grandeur I was born to achieve." A disgusted titter rippled across the gallery. Jenna's gaze flickered around the room before landing squarely on me, that sneer metastasizing into a look of pure, undiluted hatred. "They're my sons, my flesh and blood, not this decrepit harpy's. Yet because of your deranged witch hunt, I've been robbed of my rightful legacy, all for the sake of two ungrateful little bastards who did nothing but hold me back." Her voice rose to a shrill screech, spittle flying. "They don't deserve my fortune or my empire. I hope they rot right alongside you for the rest of their pathetic—" "Miss Mitchell?" The judge's boom reverberated like a shotgun blast, startling Jenna into stunned silence. "I will have order in this court." He turned his withering glare toward the jurors, who flinched collectively. In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, as well as the defendant's own admissions of guilt, any further grandstanding is unnecessary. Tugging on the hem of his robe, the judge exhaled a solemn sigh. "Jenna Mitchell, this court finds you guilty beyond all reasonable doubt on all counts, including first-degree murder, criminal conspiracy, child endangerment, money laundering, and racketeering. You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole." An anguished howl spilled from Jenna's twisted lips as the sentence hit home. "No, you can't do this to me. I was destined. I was meant for glory, for opulence." Two burly bailiffs gripped her flailing arms as she fought against their restraints with feral desperation. "Let me go. I won't rot in your cages, you pathetic scum. Alex, Caleb, you were supposed to be my legacy." Our eyes met one final time across the courtroom as she was hauled toward the doors. Ironic, the woman who had sacrificed her own children in pursuit of greatness was now little more than a rabid dog being carted away from polite society. As the doors clanged shut behind her, an eerie silence fell over the room like the aftershock of a bomb blast. We all remained motionless, struggling to process the finality of it. Then, A tiny sound pierced the hush, the muffled sniffle of a child crying. I whipped around to see Caleb burying his face in his guardian's shoulder, whole body shaking with sobs of bewildered relief and anguish. Alex's jaw was set in a rigid line, but crystalline tears streaked down his ashen cheeks. In that moment, my heart both swelled and shattered at once. No child should ever have to witness such depravity, least of all from the person who gave them life. But as I pulled them both into my embrace, permitting myself to finally unleash the torrent I'd pent up for far too long, I swore on my life it was the last trauma they would suffer. From here, their worlds could only grow kinder and brighter. The spacious backyard was bathed in a warm summer glow as the evening shadows lengthened across the grass. Raucous laughter and the crack of baseball against aluminum echoed through the twilight air. "Heads up, Grandma!" I barely had time to glance over my shoulder before the battered softball whistled past my head, Caleb's voice ringing out in a peal of unbridled mirth. Clutching my chest in mock horror, I shook my head at the now 10-year-old cherub barreling toward me. "You rascal! Where did you learn to throw like that?" "From Alex," Caleb proclaimed proudly, puffing out his narrow chest. "He's teaching me all his pitches so I can make the all-star team next year like him." I ruffled his sandy curls, speckled with grass stains and sweat. "Is that so? Well, you two had better work up an appetite for those famous Mitchell family burgers I'm about to fire up." "Yes!" Caleb crowed, bounding across the yard to where Alex stood whipping pitches into an ancient catcher's mitt. At 12 years old, he was rapidly morphing into a young man, all knobby wrists and elbows jutting out at haphazard angles, yet the easygoing smile crinkling his eyes kept the last vestiges of boyish innocence intact. For now. As I busied myself stoking the grill, they resumed their impromptu batting practice, periodic whoops piercing the evening calm. Just a couple of rambunctious boys being boys, the way nature intended. Idly flipping the burgers, I couldn't help but gaze at them with a contented sense of pride and reverence. 2 years ago, they had arrived on my doorstep as skittish, traumatized waifs, their childhoods robbed from them by that soulless, vicious monster. But to see them now, shrieking and tussling on the grass with all the wild abandon of kids their age, it was nothing short of a miracle reborn from the ashes. "Grandma?" I glanced up to find them hovering at the edge of the concrete patio, grass stains crisscrossing their knees and t-shirts askew. Caleb fidgeted in that familiar way he did when broaching a sensitive topic. You don't have any other grandkids, do you? Just us?" My breath hitched slightly as I studied their earnest young faces. It was something I'd never pressed them on, not wanting to risk dredging up memories of that shattered former life. "No, honey," I replied gently. "Just my 2 favorite grandsons." Alex scuffed at the patio with his toe, jaw tightening the way it always did when wrestling with something monumental. "So you wouldn't mind if we didn't want to go by Mitchell anymore?" A pregnant pause stretched between us as my mind whirred, processing the weight of their request. Then Caleb barreled ahead in typical headlong fashion. "It's just, you're not like her, Grandma. And that name, it reminds us of all those bad, scary times we want to forget. We want your name instead, to match our real family." His imploring gaze shimmered with unshed tears, and I felt my throat constrict as the profundity of his plea washed over me. In that moment, I saw the depth of their courage shining through, 2 little warriors who had conquered more darkness than men 4 times their age. Clearing my throat, I turned to give Alex, my solemn, sensitive soul, an opportunity to voice what he'd clearly been mustering for a while. He held my gaze steadily. "Mitchell was never who we really were anyway. You're all we have, Grandma, and all we'll ever need." The words tumbled out in a childlike rush, but their impact was profound and eternal. A renewal of selfhood, an absolving of the shackles that had bound them to that venomous succubus's legacy. Crossing the patio in 2 strides, I enveloped them in my arms as my own tears finally spilled free. A kaleidoscope of memories ricocheted through me. Motherless childhood, dreams of raising kids in a loving home of my own one day, then the heartsick reality of being alone as an empty nester. Until these 2 battered little souls had resurrected my world from the ashes of despair. And now they were my entire universe. Of course, my sweet boys, I whispered through the thickness gripping my throat. From now on you'll have the family name you were always meant for. Sutherland. My Sutherland grandsons. Their answering embrace tightened with wordless emotion searing deeper than any dialect. A bygone open wound had finally mended into an unbreakable seal of wholeness. Jenna had gambled everything in pursuit of superficial glory, only to be banished into perpetual insignificance. But I, just an ordinary Midwestern widow, had reclaimed the greatest prize of all. A true, unshakable family, bound by the eternal ties of unconditional love. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as I stepped into the cozy cafe, instantly warming me from the bitter chill outside. This was my sanctuary, a familiar space where I could breathe and recenter myself amidst the chaos of running my boutique. Little did I know that my peaceful morning routine was about to be shattered. Well, if it isn't Mira herself, a voice sneered from behind me. I froze, recognizing that condescending tone all too well. Slowly turning, I came face to face with Eli, my ex-husband, looking every bit as smug as I remembered. By his side stood a woman I didn't recognize, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer ensemble radiating an aura of wealth. Eli, I managed, struggling to keep my voice level. What a surprise! His lips curled into a cold smile. Mira, meet Lena, my fiancée and soon-to-be wife. Lena extended a perfectly manicured hand, her engagement ring glittering like a neon sign announcing her status. So lovely to finally meet you, she cooed, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. I forced myself to shake her hand, painfully aware of the stark contrast between her polished demeanor and my casual, worn attire. In that moment, I felt small and insignificant in their presence. Now, Lena, don't be too warm towards my ex-wife. Eli chuckled, looping an arm around her waist in a possessive gesture. She's just the owner of a little boutique, struggling to make ends meet. My cheeks burned with humiliation, but I refused to show weakness. At least my business is built on hard work and integrity, not shady deals like some people. Eli's eyes narrowed dangerously. Watch your tone, Mira. Wouldn't want to jeopardize that precious little shop of yours now, would we? Before I could respond, Lena interjected smoothly. Eli, dear, let's not dwell on unpleasantries. What if Mira's just upset she couldn't keep a husband satisfied? She tossed me a pitying glance that felt like a slap in the face. Rage bubbled within me, but I swallowed it down, not wanting to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. With as much dignity as I could muster, I turned on my heel and stormed out of the cafe, the weight of their laughter following me into the frigid air. As I marched down the bustling street, tears of humiliation stung my eyes. How dare Eli flaunt his new life as if our marriage meant nothing? And that Lena... Her words cut deeper than any insult, implying I was to blame for our failed relationship. But beneath the hurt and anger, a newfound determination took root. I would not crumble under their disdain. My boutique was more than just a business. It was a testament to my resilience, my very identity, and I would fight tooth and nail to protect it, no matter what challenges came my way. With renewed resolve, I straightened my shoulders and lifted my chin high. Eli and his pretentious fiancée could sneer all they wanted. This was my life, my world, and I would emerge victorious, leaving their scorn as nothing more than a bitter aftertaste. Little did I know that frosty encounter was merely the first taste of a storm brewing on the horizon, one that would test the very limits of my strength and perseverance. I should have seen the signs earlier, the cracks in our marriage that kept widening while I naively tried to plaster them over. Eli's obsession with wealth and status consumed him like a ravenous beast, leaving no room for my dreams or our life together. Another upscale client wants to book an appointment, I announced one evening, excitement dancing in my voice as I emerged from my makeshift office space. Eli barely glanced up from his laptop, his face pinched with displeasure. What did I tell you about taking on those snobby upper-class customers? They'll drain you dry with their ridiculous demands. My shoulders slumped, enthusiasm deflating, but this could be huge exposure for the boutique. If I impress them... When are you going to give up this silly hobby of yours? Eli snapped, slamming the laptop shut with a harsh thud. We need real income, not whatever pennies you collect from those cheap impulse sales. I flinched as if he'd struck me. It's not just a hobby, Eli. My boutique is my passion, my dream. I thought you supported me. he scoffed, raking a hand through his meticulously styled hair. Even in our most heated arguments, the man was consumed with appearances. Support you in this endless money pit that will never amount to anything substantial? Wake up, Mira. Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them back furiously. So my dreams don't matter as long as I'm not making Silicon Valley millions like your big-shot tech friends? Those big-shot friends actually understand the value of hard work and ambition, Eli sneered. Not wasting time on ridiculous pipe dreams that will leave us drowning in debt. His words sliced deeper than any knife. How could the man I loved tear down my aspirations so callously? But this was nothing new. A tired dance we'd performed countless times, with me desperately seeking his approval while he crushed my efforts beneath his polished dress shoes. Little did I know, Eli's contempt ran far deeper than I could have imagined. It wasn't until weeks later, when a close friend revealed the truth about his indiscretions, that the full extent of his betrayal came crashing down upon me. Mira, I'm so sorry, but I saw Eli with another woman. They were intimate. The world seemed to tilt violently as the words registered. Intimate. Another woman, my chest constricted, breath escaping in ragged gasps as the room spun around me. When the pieces finally clicked into place, a cold, hard knot of resentment formed in the pit of my stomach. All the dismissals, the put-downs, the constant belittling, it was merely a smokescreen concealing Eli's ultimate act of disrespect. He had been unfaithful. He had chosen the empty promise of wealth and status over the woman who had loved him unconditionally. And in that moment, something inside me shifted, hardened like steel, tempered by the scorching flames of his deceit. Our divorce was a mere formality after that, a rubber stamp on the death of our crumbled marriage. As I boxed up what remained of our entwined lives, I silently vowed that one day, Eli would realize the gravity of his mistakes. One day I would make him pay for every ounce of anguish and humiliation he had put me through. Vengeance burned brightly in my heart, a blazing inferno that would not be extinguished until I emerged victorious from the ashes of our shattered bonds. The divorce proceedings were finally over, and I was left surveying the smoldering ruins of my life. Eli had taken his share and vanished, leaving me to pick up the pieces alone. But I refused to be a victim any longer. With a newfound determination burning in my veins, I threw myself into resurrecting my boutique from the ashes of our failed marriage. This was my one true passion, the dream Eli had mocked and trampled upon. Well, no more. I secured a small retail space in a slowly gentrifying neighborhood, and am stretching every last dollar of my settlement to transform it into a stylish haven. Eclectic decor and hand-picked vintage furniture created a warm, inviting atmosphere that reflected my unique vision. The first few months were an uphill battle as I scrambled to rebuild my customer base and attract new clientele. Establishing myself in the competitive world of upscale retail felt like navigating a minefield. You'll never survive in this part of town. One dismissive shop owner sneered as I mistakenly wandered into his overpriced boutique seeking advice. These customers want luxury brands, not your cheap knockoff wares. I bit my tongue until I tasted copper, leveling him with an icy glare. My pieces are all meticulously curated and one of a kind, but I wouldn't expect someone who trades in generic mass-produced junk to understand true artistry. The man's face mottled with rage, but I had already spun on my heel and stormed out, refusing to justify his insults with a response. I would prove my worth through actions, not empty words. Day and night, I relentlessly promoted the boutique through social media and local events, determined to make it a success through sheer force of will. Slowly but surely, a loyal customer base emerged, drawn to the personalized experience and unique flair I offered. This dress is absolutely stunning. One repeat customer, Jenna, gushed one afternoon as she twirled in front of the mirror. I'll never find anything like this at those soulless mall chains. I beamed with pride, recalling how she had wandered in months ago, dismissive of the unknown boutique. Through patience and a genuine personal touch, I had earned her trust and admiration. I'm just so glad I can provide pieces that make women feel confident and stylish, I replied warmly. That's what true fashion should be about, empowering self-expression. As Jenna happily made her purchase, I surveyed my humble but thriving domain. The boutique had become more than just a business. It was a sanctuary, a community crafted through passion and resilience. This was my life's work, built from the shattered remains of a broken dream. No smug ex-husband or disapproving critic could dull the sense of pride and accomplishment that blossomed in my chest. I was a self-made woman who answered to no one but herself. The velvet flame of vengeance may have ignited my rebirth, but it was the joy of creation that kept me going. Little did I know, my path was about to collide with Eli's once more. But this time, I was armored in the strength of my convictions and the unbreakable spirit that had risen from the rubble of our ruined lives. This time, I would emerge the victor. The bell above the boutique door jingled, and I looked up with a welcoming smile that instantly froze on my face. Marie, an old friend from my neighborhood craft circle, stepped inside, her expression grave. "Hey, Marie, what's wrong?" I asked, concern furrowing my brow as she remained uncharacteristically silent. She exhaled heavily, wringing her hands. "Mira, I don't know how to tell you this. I just heard from the community board. Your ex-husband Eli and his new fiancée are planning a major development project." My blood chilled in my veins as realization crept in. "What kind of development?" "A massive luxury condo complex," she replied quietly. "Right here in our neighborhood." The words hung like a damning sentence in the air. I could envision the cold, imposing edifice blotting out the warm, eclectic charm of the area, the same neighborhood that had embraced my humble boutique. It would gentrify and sterilize everything in its wake. "No, he can't do this," I choked out, sinking onto a velvet-tufted ottoman as my legs threatened to give out. "That smug, heartless bastard." Marie's expression twisted in sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Mira. I know this must be incredibly difficult, especially given your history with Eli." My mind whirled as repressed memories and volatile emotions roiled within me like a violent storm. The cruel words, the belittling, the infidelity, it all came crashing back in agonizing clarity, and now he sought to destroy the one thing I had rebuilt from the wreckage of our ruined marriage. No. Not this time. Not again. My shock rapidly transmuted into a blazing fury, tempering my resolve into an unyielding blade of determination. I rose, spine straight as a steel rod, and met Marie's gaze directly. "Well, he's got another thing coming if he thinks I'll just roll over," I stated, acid lacing my tone. "I fought too damn hard to build this boutique from nothing. I clawed my way back from the depths of hell itself when Eli abandoned me. And I'll be damned if I let that miserable snake take it all away." Marie's eyes widened at the intensity blazing in my stare. "Mira, what are you going to do?" A feral smile carved itself across my face. What I should have done years ago, fight back by any means necessary. Eli wants to gentrify this neighborhood? Fine, I'll raise a storm of protest that will drown his pretentious project in a tidal wave of resistance. I stalked over to the window, glaring out at the idyllic tree-lined streets that would soon be endangered. "I spent too long being his victim, Marie. This time, the tables are turned. This time, the price of betrayal will cut much deeper than just a divorce settlement." Marie regarded me warily, but nodded in understanding. "You know I'm here for you, whatever you need." "I appreciate that," I replied, steely determination thrumming through my veins. "Because I have a feeling Eli is about to reap the whirlwind of a lifetime, and when the dust settles, it'll be me left standing tall while he wallows in the rubble of his shattered ambitions." My path was clear now. The velvet flames of vengeance roared within my breast, emboldening my every breath. If Eli thought I would surrender my boutique and my community without a vicious fight, he was gravely mistaken. This time, I would be the one dictating the terms of our engagement, and he would pay a heavy price for his deplorable arrogance. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as I rallied opposition against Eli's luxury condo development. Going door to door, I urged fellow small business owners to join my cause. This gentrification scheme will destroy everything we've built. I implored Rajesh, the jovial owner of the neighborhood's beloved Indian eatery. They'll price us out with exorbitant rent hikes and soulless corporate chains. Rajesh stroked his beard thoughtfully. "You make a fair point, Mira. My humble restaurant would not survive such changes." "Then you must stand with me," I pressed. "Together we can raise awareness, protest at community meetings, apply pressure through all legal means necessary." His eyes blazed with resolution. "You have my full support. Eli and his ilk cannot be allowed to destroy the cultural heart of our neighborhood for their greedy ambitions. One by one, I accumulated a formidable coalition of passionate small business owners and concerned residents. The local thrift store owners, artisan bakers, even the manager of the rundown but beloved bingo hall, all united under the rallying cry of preserving our unique community. Meanwhile, I devoted countless hours to unearthing any shred of legal or ethical liability in Eli's real estate plans. Poring over public documents and records, I steadily compiled a damning portfolio of evidence. Environmental impact shortcutting, building code violations, shady zoning loopholes exploited for maximum profit margins. With each new discovery, my determination solidified like steel. "You think you can gentrify this neighborhood however you please?" I muttered darkly, meticulously documenting every transgression. "I'll bury you in lawsuits and bureaucratic nightmares until your precious project asphyxiates on its own hubris." Finally, the night of the first community board meeting arrived. Eli and his sleek entourage of investors filed into the overcrowded auditorium, looking every bit the arrogant one-percenters blind to the consequences of their actions. I watched in grim satisfaction as their expressions soured upon seeing the overflowing crowd of protesters, my loyal army armed with posters and unified chants decrying the condo complex. "This is outrageous," Eli hissed as he pushed past me, his walnut eyes flashing with disdain. "You just can't let go of your miserable vendetta, can you, Mira?" I matched his glare with steely defiance. "I'm simply exercising my rights as a citizen to defend my community, Eli. Of course, you're far too arrogant to see past your own greed." His jaw clenched with barely restrained fury, but he seemed to think better of escalating the confrontation as more protesters converged on us. "We'll see how smug you are after this debacle implodes spectacularly," he growled under his breath before storming off. The meeting proved to be merely the opening salvo in my battle to bring Eli's precious development crumbling down. As he launched into his polished pitch, I sat front and center, my arsenal of evidence laid out before me like gleaming ammunition. One by one, I bombarded the hapless presenters and city officials with evidence of malfeasance, building an impenetrable legal quagmire around the complex that would prove near impossible to overcome. By the time the smoke cleared, Eli was a seething, crimson-faced contrast to his formerly smug composure. I had drawn first blood, exposing his shady practices to widespread public condemnation. "This isn't over," he snarled as the meeting dispersed amid raucous jeers and protests. "Not by a long shot." I simply smiled thinly, savoring the exquisite taste of retributive justice already on my lips. "Oh, Eli," I purred with lethal sweetness. "You have no idea just how far I'm willing to go to ensure you reap the devastation you've sown. This is merely the opening move in a game you've already lost." Eli's face contorted in impotent rage as he was swept away by the fuming crowd. Let him posture and bluster. I relished the knowledge that this was only the beginning. The fire of vengeance would not be sated until Eli's world lay in smoldering ruins at my feet. He would pay for every indignity, every heartbreak, with the shattered shards of his own hubris. And I would be the one wielding the hammer of justice that rained down upon his lofty, unworthy empire. The aftermath of that fateful community meeting left shockwaves reverberating through the city. My methodical exposé of Eli's shady development practices sparked widespread public outcry and media scrutiny. It was open season, and I intended to be the ruthless huntress ensuring my prey had nowhere to run. This is Cynthia Davis, reporting live, where yet another protest is unfolding against the controversial Wilson Luxury Condos project, a blonde reporter announced on the local news, cameras panning across a crowd of angry demonstrators. I smirked as Eli's harried face flashed on screen, dodging microphones and chants of "corrupt" while trying to exit his ostentatious sports car. A delicious sense of vindication coursed through me. My phone rang, displaying a number I recognized as Alicia's, a local journalist who had eagerly agreed to help amplify my cause. "Mira, you watchdog you," she greeted in a conspiratorial tone when I answered. "Thanks to those internal documents you leaked, the Zoning Commission has opened an official inquiry into Wilson's blatant code violations." "Wonderful news," I purred, reveling in Eli's rapidly accumulating woes. "But we're just getting started, Alicia. I have a full dossier on their underhanded dealings. everything from environmental shortcuts to shady investment laundering. There was a pause, then an incredulous chuckle from Alicia. You really did your homework, didn't you? This will bury those smug bastards in a legal hellscape of their own making. That's the idea, I replied coolly. You have my full permission and cooperation to unleash the complete exposé. No punches pulled. Overnight, a veritable tsunami of sordid revelations hit the presses. Alicia's scathing front-page article methodically eviscerated the facade of propriety around Eli's precious project. Stories of greased palms, backroom deals, and egregious flouting of regulations splashed across newspapers and airwaves alike. Absolutely shameful, a panel discussant opined on a local talk show, my comprehensive evidence laid out before him. Wilson Development's contempt for ethical business practices seems to know no bounds. Why should hard-working taxpayers foot the bill for their blatant profiteering? The public relations nightmare showed no signs of abating as the list of Eli's sins grew by the day. Government inquiries were launched, construction permits frozen, investors began jumping ship in droves, repulsed by the reputational fallout. It was sheer poetic justice when Lena herself showed up unannounced on my boutique's doorstep, eyes rimmed with smudged mascara. He lied to me, she lamented brokenly as I ushered her inside, pulling a pristine handkerchief from my pocket to dab at her tears. About all of it. Sympathy was in short supply, considering how readily she had sneered at me during our unpleasant reunion. But I permitted her to unburden herself regardless. I come from old money, but we always took pride in conducting business ethically, honorably, Lena explained between hiccuped sobs. When I saw the things Eli had done, the corners cut and people exploited just to line his pockets, I was revolted. Somehow I'm not surprised, I said flatly. Eli's moral bankruptcy was always his most defining feature. Lena's eyes hardened imperceptibly. Thank you for opening my eyes, Mira. I'm withdrawing all my family's capital from Wilson Development effective immediately. The revelation was a blow that even I hadn't anticipated. A wolfish grin tugged at my lips as I ushered the distraught woman out. Wow, I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Lena. I lied through my teeth. But maybe next time you'll think twice before judging those you deem beneath you. With her familial finances up in smoke and legal pressures mounting from every direction, even Eli could no longer ignore the writing etched in indelible scarlet on the crumbling wall. He slid into the passenger seat of my car one evening, as I was locking up the boutique, his face drooping with barely restrained fury. What do you want, Eli? I asked calmly, unsurprised by his unannounced visit. His jaw clenched as he struggled to maintain his rapidly fraying composure. This has gone too far, Mira. You've humiliated me, sabotaged my entire life's work, alienated the woman I love, all out of some pathetic need for vengeance over our divorce. I simply laughed, loud and genuine, at his impotent outburst. You think this is about mere vengeance? That's just the deliciously sweet icing on top of the justice you've earned through your own reprehensible actions. Reaching across the console, I gripped his rail-thin tie and pulled him toward me until our faces were mere inches apart. Eli recoiled from the ferocity blazing in my gaze. This was about decimating the unethical, greed-fueled empire you were foolish enough to build, I hissed with lethal certitude. You've spent your entire life trampling on the dreams and well-being of others to sate your own ravenous ambition. Well, now it's all been laid bare for the world to see. Releasing him with a contemptuous shove, I drank in the sight of Eli utterly shattered, a pitiful mockery of the arrogant snake who once sought to gentrify my beloved neighborhood out of existence. Don't worry, Eli, I sneered with blistering condescension. I'll be sure to send you a lovely housewarming gift for that quaint new hovel you and your billions can afford. Pulling away, I left him crumpled and defeated on the rain-slicked curb, the pitiable king rat finally dethroned from his rotten empire. The flames of vengeance had been stoked to an inferno, immolating any remnants of Eli's unscrupulous ambitions to ashes, and I would savor every delectable ember until the bitterness between us was finally cauterized, purged from existence forever. In the wake of the expose, Eli's opulent life unraveled with brutal efficiency. The once unstoppable Wilson Luxury Condos project ground to an unceremonious halt as legal challenges and financial penalties piled up. City inspectors swarmed the barren construction site like locusts, issuing violation after violation based on my meticulously compiled evidence. A labyrinth of bureaucratic roadblocks and injunctions erected an impenetrable barrier to the development ever regaining momentum. "It's a quagmire of their own making," a gleeful Alicia reported as footage rolled of the abandoned site behind her. "And a well-deserved reckoning for the corner-cutting, law-flouting hubris Wilson development epitomized." Distressed investors began bailing in droves, terrified of being branded accomplices in the project's unethical dealings. Investment capital swiftly evaporated into vapor as lawsuits compounded. I could scarcely conceal my glee watching Eli's pretentious dreams crash and burn in spectacular fashion. When the news broke that Lena herself had severed all financial ties in disgust, delivering a PR death knell to the beleaguered venture, I couldn't resist a visit to Eli's once glittering high-rise office. "You've got some nerve showing your smug face here," he spat upon seeing me swagger through the door unannounced. I simply shrugged, unfazed by his aggression. "I'm just admiring the scenery as your hollow empire crumbles from the inside out." His bloodshot eyes bored into me with impotent rage. You've destroyed everything I built. My reputation, my business future, my relationship with the only woman I've ever truly loved, all over some petty vendetta." "Wake up and smell the ashes, Eli," I sneered coldly. "This was never about vengeance. It was about dismantling the blight of unrestrained greed that you personify." I cast a disdainful glance around the lavish but increasingly desolate office space. All of this, it was built on a gilded foundation of exploitation and corner-cutting, pretty on the surface, but a rotting, ethical void eating away at the core. Grabbing the exquisite crystal decanter off his bar cart, I held it up to the light streaming through the plate glass window. "You always did favor the trappings of success over genuine substance, didn't you?" With a contemptuous sneer, I dropped the priceless ornament onto the marble floor, watching impassively as it shattered into glittering shards. "Just like your self-anointed empire," I intoned. "One well-placed crack in the veneer, and the whole rotten edifice implodes under the weight of its malignant foundations." Eli looked on, furious but impotent, as I turned on my heel and sauntered toward the exit. "I hope it was worth it, Eli, sacrificing integrity, ethical conduct, even the love of those closest to you, all in pursuit of that elusive success only the truly deluded could prize above all else. But don't worry." I tossed back over my shoulder with a mocking wink. "I'll be sure to stay tuned as your downfall reaches its fitting, inevitable conclusion." As I departed through the cavernous marbled lobby, leaving Eli to stew in the financial wreckage of his corporate kingdom, I felt lighter than I had in years. A profound cathartic release surged through me, expunging the lingering ghosts of betrayal and heartache that had shadowed me for too long. Eli had crafted his own undoing through sheer unadulterated greed and hubris. There was no need for vengeance, for stooping to match his depravity in order to defeat it. In his quest to create an empire at any ethical cost, he had simply handed me the means to unravel it using the integrity and perseverance he always dismissed as foolish. It was the ultimate deliverance of poetic justice, an empire of rot, dismantled from within by the integrity of one determined woman. I thought of Rajesh, Angela the thrift store owner, and the others who had lent their voices and support to my grassroots crusade. This decisive victory was as much theirs as mine, a stirring testament to the power of community solidarity over rapacious self-interest. As for Eli, his fall from corporate grace was only just beginning. Lawsuits, financial ruination, criminal probes, the karmic hammer would strike again and again until nothing remained of his tainted legacy. Only then could full reckoning be delivered. Still, a beatific smile tugged at my lips as I envisioned the years of ruin ahead for my disgraced ex-husband. The velvet flames of vengeance had finally burned themselves out. But the smoky embers of triumph warmed my soul with a profound, unshakable peace. My monster had been well and truly slain, not through hatred, but through the inexorable power of human perseverance over malignant greed. And as the sun set over my unblemished horizon, I inhaled deeply, at last tasting the crisp, revitalizing air of true deliverance. In the aftermath of Eli's downfall, a wave of support and goodwill buoyed my humble boutique. What was once a solitary endeavor blossomed into a vibrant community hub, embraced by the very neighbors I had fought to protect. "Did you see the incredible spread they did on you in City Living magazine?" Angela, the animated owner of the nearby thrift store, gushed one sunny afternoon as she browsed my signature rack of embroidered boho dresses. "Miraventura, the unstoppable force of neighborhood integrity," she read aloud from the glossy cover, her voice swelling with pride. "Not bad for a little hobby business, eh?" I laughed, equal parts embarrassed and deeply moved by the outpouring of support from those who once viewed me as just another quirky boutique owner. I was simply doing what anyone would do when faced with defending their community, I demurred modestly. But secretly I reveled in the evidence that my steadfast perseverance had transformed me into a celebrated local icon. "Well, this unstoppable force has another loyal customer." Angela winked, draping a vivid magenta dress adorned with intricate floral embroidery over her tanned arm. "Dinner with the girls is going to be so much cuter thanks to you." As she handed me her payment, I reflected on how my once solitary crusade had sparked a revitalized community spirit throughout the neighborhood. The threat of crass gentrification and cultural erasure had unified us all in a way I could have never predicted. From Rajesh's cheerful curry house to the Brunswick lanes where Andrea still reigned as bingo queen, my fellow small business owners radiated a renewed sense of vigor and determination to preserve the eclectic soul of our little enclave. No longer were we just strangers coexisting on the same bustling street corners. We were a tribe bonded by our shared trials and triumphs. Many nights, we would spill from whichever watering hole we congregated at and amble down the vibrantly muraled sidewalks, energized by the lively cross-pollination of cultures that made our neighborhood such a rare gem. In those moments, I felt an overwhelming swell of gratitude toward whatever cosmic forces had delivered me to this confluence of resilient individualists. Because in defending the authenticity of our home, I had inadvertently crafted my own rebirth from the ashes of past traumas. The specter of Eli and his betrayals no longer loomed like a perpetual storm cloud over my outlook. For far too long, I had allowed the baggage of our toxic marriage to define my identity and path forward. But seeing firsthand the transformative power of solidarity over cynicism had catalyzed my own metamorphosis from jaded divorcee into the self-actualized woman I had buried beneath the rubble of unrealistic expectations. I was Miraventura, the boutique owner who fought gentrification behemoths and emerged victorious without compromising her integrity. The unyielding spirit who rallied an entire community's resistance through sheer grit and determination. And most importantly, I was no longer a casualty of circumstance, but the master architect crafting my own destiny from a canvas of endless possibility. "Here's to new beginnings," I murmured the next evening, raising a glass of crisp white wine in a private toast. The soft clinking of crystal resonated like the sweet melody of liberty, echoing the exhilaration of having crossed the threshold into an invigorating future untainted by the demons of the past. My path would be paved by the courage of my own convictions, not shackled to the whims of those blinded by greed and pretense. I would embrace each new sunrise as a blessing of infinite potential, savoring the hard-won wisdom of one who stared defeat in the eyes and uncovered her unshakable spirit. As the velvety summer night enveloped my bustling neighborhood in its warm, enfolding embrace, I stepped outside and inhaled the heady scents of revelry. Spicy curry and street fare intermingling with the floral bouquets adorning the sidewalk trees. My monster had been vanquished, my quest for integrity and authenticity triumphant, and for the first time in far too long, I surrendered completely to the euphoric promise of new horizons gleaming brilliantly before me. A smile tugged at my lips as I meandered down the incandescent street, the melodic sounds of my community's vibrant soul caressing my world-seasoned heart. This was my rebirth, my deliverance into the life of abundance and purpose I had fiercely reclaimed through the ashes of adversity. And nothing, I knew with serene certainty, could ever extinguish the brilliant radiance of this new dawn. I never saw it coming. One moment I was standing in my living room, confronting Trent about his suspicious behavior and unexplained absences. The next, I found myself trapped in the dark, damp confines of our basement, a place I hadn't set foot in for years. "What is the meaning of this, Trent?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and outrage. "Why are you doing this?" Trent's normally warm, brown eyes had turned cold and calculating. "I'm doing what I have to, Avery," he said, his tone laced with a chilling finality. "You were never meant to see the truth." I watched in horror as he slammed the metal door behind him, the sound echoing through the cavernous space like a death knell. Panic gripped me, my heart pounding against my chest as I frantically searched for a way out. The basement was a maze of shadows, the air thick with the musty smell of neglect. I stumbled through the darkness, my hands tracing the rough, uneven walls, desperately seeking an escape. But the more I explored, the more it became clear that Trent had trapped me in this dank, forgotten corner of our home. "Trent, please!" I shouted, my voice cracking with desperation. "Let me out of here!" There was no response, only the eerie silence that seemed to taunt me, mocking my helplessness. I sank to the floor, my knees trembling as the reality of my situation sank in. How could this be happening? Trent, the man I had loved and trusted for nearly a decade, had turned against me in the most unimaginable way. Flashes of our life together played in my mind, the way he had swept me off my feet with his charming smile and his grand promises of a life filled with adventure and success. I had been so blinded by his facade, so eager to believe in the fairy tale he had spun. Now, that fairy tale had shattered, leaving me trapped in a waking nightmare. As the minutes ticked by, my mind raced, searching for a way to escape. I knew I couldn't give in to despair, not when I had so much to live for. Somewhere out there, my friends and family were wondering where I was, and I couldn't let them down. Summoning every ounce of courage I could muster, I began to explore the basement more thoroughly, searching for anything that could aid my escape. The space was cluttered with old boxes and forgotten relics, but as I sifted through the debris, a glimmer of hope emerged. Tucked away in the corner, partially obscured by a tattered tarp, was a small metal toolbox. I yanked it free, my fingers trembling as I popped it open. Inside, I found a set of old, rusted tools, a hammer, a screwdriver, and a pair of pliers. A wave of determination washed over me. I may have been trapped, but I wasn't helpless. With these tools, I could find a way out of this nightmare and reclaim my life. Gripping the screwdriver tightly, I set to work. My mind focused on the task at hand. I would not be a victim, not in my own home. Trent would pay for what he had done, and I would make sure of it. As I tinkered with the tools, a sense of purpose coursed through me, pushing back the fear that had threatened to consume me. I would find a way out of this basement, no matter what it took. The old screwdriver felt heavy in my hand, a makeshift weapon against the darkness that surrounded me. I pried open the panels of the door, searching for any weaknesses, any sign of an escape route. Time seemed to stand still as I worked, the ticking of an unseen clock the only measure of the seconds that passed. With each failed attempt, my frustration grew, but I refused to give in to despair. Then, just as I was about to give up, my fingers brushed against a small, hidden compartment in the door's frame. My heart raced as I pulled it open, revealing a set of keys, Trent's keys. "Trent, you fool," I muttered, a bitter smile spreading across my lips. "Did you really think you could keep me trapped here forever?" I wasted no time in fitting the key into the lock, turning it with a soft click. The door swung open, and I stepped out into the dimly lit hallway, my senses on high alert. The house was eerily quiet, save for the muffled sounds of Trent moving about upstairs. I crept forward, my footsteps light and cautious, until I reached the living room. That's when I saw it. A stack of papers, neatly arranged on the coffee table. They were financial statements, bank records, and legal documents, all bearing Trent's name. As I sifted through them, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. "Oh, Trent," I whispered, "what have you done?" The papers revealed a web of financial fraud, hidden offshore accounts, and shady business deals. It was all there, the damning evidence of Trent's betrayal, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. I quickly gathered the documents, stuffing them into a messenger bag I found nearby. With this evidence, I would be able to expose Trent's crimes and bring him to justice. Just then, I heard the distinct sound of footsteps on the stairs. My heart raced as I ducked behind the couch, holding my breath and praying that Trent wouldn't find me. "Avery?" Trent's voice called out, the hint of panic in his tone betraying his composure. "Avery, where are you?" I watched as he strode into the living room, his eyes darting around the space. He approached the coffee table, his brow furrowing as he noticed the missing documents. "No, no," he muttered, his hands trembling. "This can't be happening." I seized the moment, stepping out from my hiding place and confronting him head-on. "Looking for these, Trent?" I said, holding up the incriminating papers. Trent's face paled, the color draining from his features. "Avery, how did I escape?" I interrupted, my voice laced with disdain. "It seems you underestimated me, dear husband. Now, it's time to face the consequences of your actions." Trent's expression morphed from shock to panic as he realized the gravity of his predicament. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, silencing him. "Save it, Trent. I've seen everything, and I'm not going to let you get away with this." With that, I turned and headed for the door, determined to seek the help of the authorities and ensure that Trent's reign of deception and fraud came to an end. With the incriminating documents in hand, I knew I had to get out of the house as quickly as possible. Trent's panicked expression had told me all I needed to know. He would stop at nothing to keep his secrets hidden. I hurried toward the front door, my heart pounding in my chest, but just as I reached for the handle, I heard Trent's voice behind me, dripping with a chilling mixture of desperation and rage. "Avery, stop! You can't leave. You have no idea what you're dealing with." I turned to face him, holding the bag of documents close to my body. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with, Trent. You're a fraud, a criminal, and I'm going to make sure the world knows it." His eyes narrowed, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the man I had once loved, the charming, charismatic figure who had swept me off my feet. But that man was gone, replaced by a twisted, desperate individual willing to do anything to preserve his carefully constructed facade. "Please, Avery, you have to understand," he pleaded, taking a step closer. "If you leave, you'll be putting yourself in grave danger. I'm only trying to protect you." I scoffed, unwilling to be swayed by his empty words. "Protect me? You locked me in the basement, Trent. You betrayed my trust and everything we built together. I won't let you manipulate me anymore." I turned the doorknob, but before I could pull the door open, Trent lunged forward, his hands grasping at the bag. We struggled, each of us refusing to let go, until a sudden movement from the corner of my eye caught my attention. "Lena!" I cried, recognizing my neighbor standing just outside the open door. Lena's eyes widened as she took in the scene unfolding before her. Without hesitation, she rushed forward, her hands pushing Trent away from me. "Get away from her, you monster!" Lena shouted, her voice laced with fury. Trent stumbled back, a look of pure panic on his face. "Lena, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Lena interrupted, stepping in front of me protectively. "I've seen the way you've been behaving, Trent, and I won't let you hurt Avery anymore." Trent's gaze darted between Lena and me, his desperation palpable. "You have to believe me. I'm trying to keep her safe. If she leaves, she'll be in grave danger." Lena scoffed, her expression unwavering. "We both know that's a lie. Now, get out of our way, or I'll make sure the police hear everything." Trent's shoulders slumped in defeat, and without another word he stepped aside, allowing Lena and me to pass. As we hurried out the door, I couldn't help but glance back at him, a tinge of sorrow mixed with the overwhelming sense of relief. Once we were safely outside, Lena turned to me, her eyes filled with concern. "Avery, are you all right? What's going on?" I took a deep breath, my hands still trembling from the ordeal. "Lena, I need your help. Trent is not who he seems. He's been involved in criminal activities, and I have the evidence to prove it." Lena's expression hardened, and she nodded resolutely. "Then we need to get this to the authorities, immediately. You're not alone in this, Avery. I'm with you, every step of the way." As we rushed toward Lena's car, I knew that with her by my side, I finally had a chance to bring Trent's deception to an end. The road ahead would be difficult, but I was more determined than ever to reclaim my life and see that justice was served. As Lena and I sped away from the house, a sense of relief and determination washed over me. I had escaped Trent's clutches, and now, with the incriminating documents in hand, I had a chance to expose his crimes and reclaim my life. "Where are we going?" I asked, gripping the bag tightly. "To my place," Lena replied, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "We need to gather some people we can trust and figure out our next move." I nodded. knowing that I couldn't take on Trent alone. This was a battle that required a unified front, and I was grateful to have Lena by my side. When we arrived at Lena's cozy townhouse, she ushered me inside, her expression serious. "Avery, I know this is a lot to process, but we need to act quickly. Trent is dangerous, and he's not going to give up without a fight." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "I know, Lena. That's why I need your help. I can't do this alone." Lena placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone. I've already reached out to a couple of people who can help us." Just then, the doorbell rang, and Lena hurried to answer it. I watched as she ushered in a familiar face, Marcus, my childhood friend. "Avery," Marcus exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug. "Lena told me what happened. Are you all right?" "I'm okay, Marcus," I replied, squeezing his hand gratefully. "But Trent? He's not who I thought he was." Marcus's expression darkened. "I always knew there was something off about that guy. What did he do?" I quickly explained the situation, outlining Trent's web of deceit and the damning evidence I had uncovered. Marcus's face tightened with a mix of shock and anger. "That son of a bitch," he growled. "Don't worry, Avery. We're going to make sure he pays for what he's done." Just then, the doorbell rang again, and Lena ushered in another guest, Eliza, a lawyer friend of hers. "Avery, I'm so sorry to hear about what you've been through," Eliza said, her voice laced with concern. "Lena told me everything, and I'm here to help in any way I can." I felt a surge of gratitude, knowing that I had the support of these powerful allies. Together, we would take down Trent and ensure that he faced the consequences of his actions. "Thank you all for being here," I said, my voice steady. "I know Trent is a formidable opponent, but with your help, I'm confident we can expose his crimes and bring him to justice." The group gathered around Lena's dining room table, poring over the documents I had retrieved. Eliza took charge, her legal expertise guiding our discussion. "This evidence is damning, Avery," she said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We can use it to build a strong case against Trent, but we'll need to be strategic in how we approach this." Marcus chimed in, his eyes gleaming with determination. "Whatever it takes, we'll do it. Trent's not going to get away with this, not on our watch." As I listened to my friend's unwavering support, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was no longer alone in this fight. Together, we would bring Trent down and reclaim the life he had stolen from me. Seated around Lena's dining room table, the group pored over the documents I had obtained, each of us determined to uncover the full extent of Trent's deceit. Eliza, the savvy lawyer, took the lead, her sharp eyes scanning the financial records and legal paperwork. "This is worse than I thought," she murmured, her brow furrowing in concentration. "Trent has been involved in a complex web of fraud, money laundering, and other illicit activities. We'll need to tread carefully if we're going to bring him down." Marcus, my loyal childhood friend, clenched his fist, his knuckles turning white. "That bastard," he growled. "After everything he's put Avery through, he deserves to rot in prison." Lena placed a calming hand on Marcus's arm. "Easy, Marcus. We can't afford to be reckless. Trent is dangerous, and we need to make sure we have an airtight case against him." I nodded, my own anger simmering just beneath the surface. Lena's right. We need to be strategic, and that means gathering as much evidence as possible. Trent won't go down without a fight. Eliza cleared her throat, drawing our attention. "Well, I have an idea. It's risky, but if we pull it off, we might be able to catch Trent red-handed and expose his crimes to the world." We leaned in, hanging on her every word as she laid out her plan. It was a bold, daring scheme that would require all of our resources and unwavering determination. But as Eliza spoke, I felt a surge of hope. This was our chance to take back control and make Trent pay for his betrayal. "Are you all in?" Eliza asked, her gaze sweeping across the table. Without hesitation, we all nodded, our resolve steeled by the prospect of justice. In the days that followed, we set our plan in motion, each of us playing a crucial role. Lena and Marcus used their connections to gather additional information about Trent's activities, while Eliza worked tirelessly to ensure our legal strategy was airtight. Meanwhile, I found myself delving into the world of digital espionage, hacking into Trent's accounts and monitoring his movements. It was a risky endeavor, but the thought of Trent's reckoning fueled my determination. As we inched closer to our goal, the tension in the air was palpable. Trent seemed oblivious to our machinations, continuing to go about his day-to-day life with his usual air of confidence and charm. "He has no idea what's coming," Eliza said, a triumphant gleam in her eye. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for the man I had once loved, but that sentiment was quickly overshadowed by the thirst for justice. "Let's make sure he pays for what he's done," I said, my voice resolute. With the final pieces of our plan in place, we set the stage for Trent's downfall. The day of the big event arrived, and as I stood alongside my allies, I felt a sense of power and determination that I had never experienced before. When Trent arrived, his usual swagger replaced by a hint of unease, I knew the moment of reckoning had arrived. It was time to confront him, to expose his crimes, and to ensure that he faced the consequences of his actions. As I stepped forward, the incriminating documents in hand, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that was about to unfold. As Trent approached, his gaze darting around the crowded event space, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was the moment we had been waiting for, the chance to bring him down and expose his deceit once and for all. I stepped forward, the incriminating documents clutched in my hand. "Trent," I called out, my voice ringing out across the room. "We need to talk." Trent's eyes widened as he recognized me, and a flicker of panic crossed his features. He tried to maintain his composure, but I could see the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. "Avery," he said, his tone laced with a forced calmness, "what are you doing here?" "I'm here to expose your crimes, Trent," I replied, my words dripping with venom. "Your web of fraud and deception ends today." A hush fell over the crowd as they sensed the tension in the air. Trent's gaze darted around the room, his eyes pleading for someone to intervene, but no one moved. "I don't know what you're talking about, Avery," he said, his voice wavering. "This is all just a misunderstanding." I stepped closer, holding the documents up for all to see. "Oh, it's no misunderstanding, Trent. These documents prove that you've been embezzling funds, manipulating financial records, and even laundering money. Your entire empire is built on a foundation of lies." Trent's face paled, and I could see the beads of sweat forming on his brow. "Avery, please, you have to understand. I was only trying to protect you. Everything I've done for us." I scoffed, the disgust evident in my expression. "Protect me? You locked me in a basement, Trent. You betrayed my trust and everything we had. And now, you're trying to cover up your crimes by playing the victim?" The crowd erupted in murmurs, and I could see the realization dawning on their faces. Trent's carefully crafted image was crumbling before our eyes. "This is all a lie," Trent shouted, his desperation palpable. "Avery is the one who's been unfaithful, not me. She's the one who's been stealing from me." I shook my head, unwilling to let him deflect the blame. "Nice try, Trent, but your lies won't work this time. The authorities have already been informed, and they're on their way to arrest you." Trent's eyes widened in horror, and he took a step back, his gaze darting around the room in search of an escape. But there was nowhere for him to run. Not this time. "No, this can't be happening," he cried, his voice laced with a mix of fear and fury. "Avery, you have to believe me. I'm the victim here." I watched as the realization dawned on him, the walls closing in as his carefully constructed world crumbled around him. There was no more room for his deceptions, no more chances to escape the consequences of his actions. "It's over, Trent," I said, my voice firm and unyielding. "Your reign of terror is at an end." Just then, the sound of sirens echoed through the air, signaling the arrival of the authorities. Trent's face contorted with a desperate panic, and he made one final, futile attempt to flee. But it was too late. The police officers swiftly apprehended him, their faces grim as they read him his rights. I stood there, my heart racing as I watched Trent being led away, his desperate pleas fading into the distance. The confrontation had been intense, but it was over. Trent's downfall had been set in motion, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. As I watched the police officers lead Trent away, a wave of emotions washed over me. Relief, yes, but also a lingering sense of disbelief and sorrow. Despite everything he had done, a part of me still couldn't reconcile the man I had married with the criminal he had become. The crowd around me erupted in a flurry of activity, people whispering and murmuring, their expressions a mix of shock and awe. I stood there, clutching the incriminating documents, feeling a strange sense of both triumph and emptiness. Lena, Marcus, and Eliza quickly gathered around me, their faces etched with concern. "Avery, are you okay?" Lena asked, placing a gentle hand on my arm. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing thoughts. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought it would end like this." Marcus squeezed my shoulder, his expression hardening. "He got what he deserved, Avery. That bastard's gonna pay for what he's done to you." Eliza nodded in agreement, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. "We'll make sure he faces the full consequences of his actions. The evidence we gathered is solid, and the authorities are already building their case against him." I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Then let's make sure justice is served. I want Trent to lose everything. His business, his reputation, everything he's worked so hard to build." The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Trent's arrest made headlines, and as the details of his crimes began to unfold, the public's outrage only intensified. Suddenly, those he had once manipulated and charmed turned against him, eager to see him brought to justice. His business empire crumbled as clients and partners severed ties, unwilling to be associated with his tarnished name. Investors pulled out, and the once thriving company found itself on the brink of collapse. Trent, once the picture of success and affluence, was reduced to a tattered shadow of his former self. I watched from the sidelines as he desperately tried to defend himself, but his lies and excuses only served to dig him deeper into a hole of his own making. At one point during a heated court hearing, Trent turned to me, his eyes wild and pleading. "Avery, you have to help me," he begged, his voice trembling. "I can't go to prison. You have to make them see reason." I stared at him, my expression unwavering. "You had your chance, Trent. You chose to betray me, to betray everything we had. Now you have to face the consequences of your actions." Trent's face contorted with a mix of rage and despair. "You're going to ruin me," he shouted, his outburst drawing the attention of the court. The judge, unimpressed by Trent's outburst, shook his head in disgust. "Mr. Clark, your actions have already ruined you. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and I have no choice but to remand you into custody until your trial." Trent's shoulders slumped in defeat, and as the bailiffs escorted him away, I couldn't help but feel a pang of pity. Despite everything he had done, a part of me still mourned the man I had once loved, the one who had so skillfully hidden his true nature behind a facade of charm and success. But that man was gone, replaced by a desperate, broken individual who was now facing the full weight of his crimes. As I watched him disappear, I knew that this was the end of an era, the end of Trent's reign of deception, and the beginning of a new chapter in my life. As the dust settled around Trent's dramatic downfall, I found myself standing at a crossroads in my life. The man I had once loved and trusted was now facing the consequences of his actions, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my own shattered existence. In the weeks that followed, I dove headfirst into rebuilding my career and reclaiming my independence. With the support of Lena, Marcus, and Eliza, I was able to secure a new job as a marketing consultant, using my skills and experience to forge a fresh start. "You know, Avery, I'm really proud of you," Lena said one evening as we sipped our wine at her cozy townhouse. "After everything you've been through, you're picking yourself up and moving forward." I smiled, feeling a sense of pride and relief wash over me. It hasn't been easy, but I'm determined to make the most of this new chapter. Trent may have taken so much from me, but he can't take away my strength and resilience. Lena reached across the table, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. "And you have us, Avery. We're here for you, no matter what." I nodded, knowing that I was truly blessed to have such loyal and unwavering friends by my side. "I don't know what I'd do without you all. You've been my lifeline through this whole ordeal." Marcus, who had joined us for the evening, leaned back in his chair, a mischievous grin on his face. "Well, what are friends for? We're just glad we could help take that son of a bitch down. He's getting what he deserves. And you, Avery, you're the one who came out on top." I couldn't help but chuckle at Marcus's blunt assessment. That may be true, but it hasn't exactly been easy. Trent was a big part of my life for so long, and letting go of that has been challenging, to say the least. Eliza, who had been quietly listening, leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. I can only imagine how difficult this must be for you, Avery, but you've shown incredible strength and resilience. You're not defined by transactions. You're so much more than that. I nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for my friends and their unwavering support. You're right, Eliza. I'm ready to move on and focus on the future. Trent may have taken away my security and sense of trust, but he can't take away my drive and determination to rebuild my life. As the evening wore on, we shared laughter, exchanged stories, and made plans for the future. I found myself feeling lighter, more hopeful than I had in months. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my work, pouring my energy into developing innovative marketing strategies for my clients. The more I immersed myself in my career, the more I felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment returning to my life. And as I navigated this new chapter, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had led me here. Trent's betrayal had been a devastating blow, but with the unwavering support of my friends and my own indomitable spirit, I had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. I may have lost my fairy tale, but in its place I had gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that I was capable of overcoming even the darkest of obstacles. And as I looked towards the future, I felt a renewed sense of excitement and possibility, ready to embrace all that lay ahead. I thought I had it all figured out, the perfect bakery, the perfect marriage, the perfect life. But as I walked into my bakery that fateful morning, I realized everything I thought I knew was about to crumble. The chalkboard sign outside my bakery, Julianne's Artisan Breads, usually greeted customers with a cheerful message. But this morning, the words scrawled across it made my heart sink. You think you've baked the sweet life, Julianne, but I'm about to add some sour. I stared at the ominous message, my fingers trembling as I unlocked the front door. What did this mean? Who was threatening me? As I stepped inside, the familiar aroma of freshly baked bread did little to calm my nerves. Carlos, did you see this? I called out to my most trusted employee, who was already busy preparing for the day's baking. Carlos emerged from the back, wiping the flour from his hands. Sigh, Julianne, I found it when I arrived this morning. Any idea who could be behind this? I shook my head, trying to maintain my composure. No, not a clue, but I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Just then, the sound of the bell above the front door announced the arrival of my husband, Brett. I watched as he strode in, his usual charming smile in place. Morning, honey. He leaned in to kiss me, but I turned my head, unable to hide my distress. Brett, did you see the message on the chalkboard? His brow furrowed in concern. What message? I just got here. I recounted the ominous warning, searching his face for any sign of recognition or guilt. Do you have any idea who might be behind this? Brett's eyes widened, and he placed a comforting hand on my arm. Julianne, I'm as shocked as you are. This is clearly some kind of twisted prank. Don't worry, we'll figure it out together. I wanted to believe him, but something in the way he avoided my gaze made me uneasy. Before I could press him further, the bell above the door chimed again, and my assistant, Elena, strode in. Good morning, Julianne. She greeted me with a bright smile. And hello, Brett. Did you two see the message out front? Isn't it just dreadful? The way she glanced at Brett as she spoke sent a chill down my spine. Had they planned this together? I studied their interactions, searching for any sign of familiarity beyond what was appropriate between an employee and her boss's husband. Yes, we saw it, I replied, my voice tight. I'm going to call the police and see if they can shed any light on this. Oh, Julianne, I'm sure it's just a silly prank, Elena said, placing a hand on my shoulder. Let's not overreact. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. But as I looked into her eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew more than she was letting on. And the way Brett's gaze kept shifting between us only heightened my suspicion. Something was wrong, very wrong. And I was determined to get to the bottom of it, no matter the cost. The rest of that day was a blur as I tried to make sense of the cryptic message and my growing suspicions about Brett and Elena. Something wasn't right, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. As I went about my usual bakery routine, I found myself scrutinizing every interaction between my husband and my assistant. The way their eyes would linger on each other, the subtle shifts in their body language, it all felt like a betrayal. That evening, After the bakery had closed and Carlos had gone home, I approached Brett in our modest apartment above the shop. "We need to talk," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained anger. Brett looked up from the newspaper he was reading, his brow furrowing in concern. "What's wrong, honey?" "Don't honey me," I snapped. "I want to know what's going on between you and Elena." His eyes widened, and he quickly folded the newspaper, setting it aside. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Elena's my employee, nothing more." I narrowed my eyes, studying his face for any sign of deception. "Really? Because I've noticed the way you two look at each other, the way you've been spending more time with her, even when it's not necessary for the bakery." Brett let out a heavy sigh and ran a hand through his hair. "Julianne, you're being ridiculous. Elena is simply a hard-working employee who I value. There's nothing going on between us." "I don't believe you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think you and Elena are plotting something against me and my bakery." Brett's eyes widened, and for a moment he looked genuinely shocked. "Julianne, how could you even think that? I love you, and this bakery is our dream. Why would I ever want to betray that?" "I don't know," I admitted, feeling the sting of tears in my eyes. "But that message on the chalkboard and the way you two have been acting, it all feels like a betrayal." Brett reached out to me, but I flinched away from his touch. "Julianne, please, you have to believe me. I would never do anything to hurt you or our bakery. You're the most important thing in the world to me." I shook my head, unwilling to accept his reassurances. "I want you to leave. I can't be around you right now." "Julianne, please," Brett pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. "Don't do this. Let's talk it through. I love you and I would never betray you." But I had made up my mind. "Just go, Brett. I need time to think." As he reluctantly gathered his things and left the apartment, I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by a deep ache in my chest. Had I really just kicked my husband out? What if I was wrong about all of this? I sank down onto the couch, burying my face in my hands as the tears finally broke free. Everything I thought I knew was crumbling, and I had no idea what to do next. One thing was certain, though. I had to get to the bottom of this. I couldn't let Brett and Elena get away with whatever they were plotting. My bakery, my life, was on the line, and I was determined to fight for it, no matter the cost. As I sat alone in the apartment, the weight of my confrontation with Brett hung heavy in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that he and Elena were up to something, but I needed more proof. I knew I couldn't take them on alone, not with the power they held over my bakery. That's when I remembered my next-door neighbor, Maggie. She was a sharp-witted lawyer, and I knew she would be just the person I needed to help me uncover the truth. I hurried downstairs and across the street to Maggie's house, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. I knocked on her door, and she answered, her brow furrowing with concern as she took in my disheveled appearance. "Julianne, what's wrong?" she asked, ushering me inside. I quickly explained the situation, the cryptic message, my suspicions about Brett and Elena, and the confrontation in our apartment. Maggie's eyes widened with surprise. "Wow, Julianne, that's a lot to take in. But I have to say, your instincts sound right on the money. There's definitely something fishy going on." "I know," I said, wringing my hands. "I just don't know what to do. I can't lose my bakery, Maggie. It's my life's work, and I can't let Brett and Elena take it from me." Maggie placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "Don't worry, Julianne. I'm here to help. We'll get to the bottom of this, and I'll make sure you keep your bakery." I felt a surge of relief at her words. "Thank you, Maggie. I don't know what I'd do without you." Just then, the sound of a car pulling up outside caught our attention. I peered out the window and recognized Carlos, one of my most trusted bakery employees, hurrying up the walkway. Maggie and I answered the door, and Carlos immediately launched into an urgent explanation. "Julianne, I think something is very wrong. I was doing the weekly inventory, and I noticed some discrepancies in the numbers. I think Brett and Elena may be embezzling money from the bakery." My heart sank, and Maggie's eyes narrowed with determination. "That's exactly what we were just talking about, Carlos. Julianne needs our help to take them down." Carlos nodded, his brow furrowed with concern. "I'm with you, Julianne. This bakery is my second home, and I won't let them destroy it." The three of us huddled together, Our heads bent low as we hatched a plan. Maggie would use her legal expertise to help us gather the necessary evidence, while Carlos and I would continue to monitor the bakery's finances and operations. As we parted ways, a newfound sense of purpose filled me. I may have been betrayed by the two people I trusted most, but I had the support of my allies. Together, we would take down Brett and Elena and reclaim my bakery. I returned to the apartment, my mind racing with the details of our plan. I knew the road ahead would be tough, but I was more determined than ever to see it through. This was my life's work, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me without a fight. As the sun began to set, I looked out over the bustling streets of our small town, a steely resolve taking hold. Brett and Elena had underestimated me, and they were about to learn a hard lesson. You don't mess with Julianne and her bakery. Over the next few weeks, Maggie, Carlos, and I executed our plan with precision and determination. We meticulously gathered evidence of Brett and Elena's embezzlement and their plans to take over my bakery. It was a delicate dance, but I was fueled by a fire that refused to be extinguished. The day of our sting operation finally arrived, and I felt a mixture of nerves and anticipation as I waited for Brett and Elena to arrive. Maggie had arranged for a select group of community leaders and influential patrons to witness the confrontation, and I knew this was our best chance to expose their betrayal. As Brett and Elena walked through the bakery doors, their expressions shifting from confusion to thinly veiled panic, I knew the game was on. "Julianne, what's going on?" Brett asked, his voice laced with apprehension. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders as I faced them. "Brett, Elena, I've gathered everyone here today because I have something I need to share with you and our community." I gestured to Maggie, who stepped forward, a stack of documents in her hands. "Over the past few weeks, we've uncovered evidence that you two have been embezzling funds from Julianne's bakery," Maggie announced, her voice firm and unwavering. "We have bank statements, receipts, and witness accounts that prove your involvement in a plot to take over this business." Brett's face drained of color, and Elena's eyes darted around the room, her lips pressed into a thin line. "This is absurd," Brett exclaimed, his hands trembling. "Julianne, how could you do this to me, to us?" I felt a pang of sadness, but I refused to let it sway me. "Don't play the victim, Brett. We have the proof, and we're not going to let you get away with this." Elena stepped forward, her expression defiant. "You have no idea what you're up against, Julianne. This bakery is ours, and we'll do whatever it takes to keep it." The room erupted in shocked murmurs, and I knew we had struck a nerve. Maggie raised her hand, commanding the attention of the crowd. "That's where you're wrong, Elena. This bakery belongs to Julianne, and we're not going to let you or Brett take it from her. We have all the evidence we need to take this to court and ensure that justice is served." Brett and Elena exchanged a desperate look, and I could see the realization dawning on their faces. They were trapped, and their carefully constructed plan was unraveling before their eyes. "You won't get away with this," Brett hissed, his eyes narrowed with fury. I stepped forward, my gaze unwavering. "Oh, but we already have. This bakery is my life's work, and I won't let you or anyone else take it from me. I'm prepared to fight for it, no matter what it takes." The room erupted in a chorus of murmurs and applause, and I knew in that moment that the tide had turned. Brett and Elena were no longer the ones in control. I was. As the community members gathered around me, offering their support and congratulations, I felt a sense of triumph wash over me. This was just the beginning of the battle, but I was more determined than ever to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The aftermath of the confrontation with Brett and Elena sent shockwaves through our tight-knit community. Word of their betrayal and my efforts to expose their scheme spread like wildfire, and suddenly I found myself at the center of a heated public debate. On one side, there were those who rallied behind me, praising my courage and determination in standing up to the deceit. They commended my actions and vowed to continue supporting my bakery. But on the other side, there were those who questioned my methods, arguing that I had gone too far in publicly humiliating my own husband and his accomplice. As I stood at the counter of my bakery, watching the steady stream of customers come and go, I couldn't help but feel a growing unease. The community I had once thought of as my family was now divided, and I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I had somehow crossed a line. One day, as I was preparing the dough for the day's bread, a familiar face stepped through the door. It was Maggie, her brow furrowed with concern. "Julianne, we need to talk," she said, her voice low and serious. I wiped my hands on my apron and gestured for her to follow me into the back. "What is it, Maggie?" "I've been hearing some rumblings around town," she began, her expression grave. "Some people are starting to question the way you went about this whole thing. They're saying you took it too far, that you should have handled it more discreetly." I felt my heart sink. "What? But we had the evidence, Maggie. We were just trying to protect the bakery." She placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "I know, Julianne, and I stand by you. But you have to understand, not everyone sees it that way. There's a growing sentiment that you were more interested in revenge than justice." I shook my head, my hands clenching into fists. "That's not true. I was just trying to save my life's work, my legacy. How can they not see that?" Maggie sighed heavily. "I know, Julianne, but the reality is you're facing a battle on two fronts now. The legal one against Brett and Elena and the court of public opinion. And that second one could be just as dangerous." I felt a surge of frustration and despair. "So what am I supposed to do, Maggie? Just let them get away with it?" "I can't do that, not after everything they've done." "I'm not saying that," Maggie replied, her tone measured. "But you need to be careful. The more you push, the more you risk alienating the very people who could be your greatest allies." Her words weighed heavily on me as I returned to the front of the bakery, my mind racing. I had thought that exposing Brett and Elena's betrayal would be the end of the battle. But now it seemed that I was facing an even greater challenge, rebuilding the trust and loyalty of my community. As the day wore on, I found myself second-guessing my actions, wondering if I had gone too far in my quest for justice. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a grave mistake in my pursuit of revenge. I knew I had to find a way to mend the fractures in my community, to show them that my actions were not driven by personal animus, but by a deep-rooted desire to protect the legacy I had built. It was going to be an uphill battle, but I was determined to come out on top, no matter the cost. In the wake of the public confrontation, the bakery became the epicenter of a heated battle for the hearts and minds of the community. On one side, there were those who rallied behind me, unwavering in their support and outrage over Brett and Elena's betrayal. But on the other, a growing faction questioned my methods and accused me of taking things too far. The battle lines were drawn, and I found myself caught in the middle, struggling to keep my bakery afloat amidst the chaos. One morning, as I was setting up the shop, the bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see a familiar face. Dean, the talented young baker I had recently hired. "Julianne, can I have a word?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. I gestured for him to follow me to the back, my heart sinking with dread. "What is it, Dean?" He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on mine. "I've been hearing some troubling things around town. People are saying that you went too far in exposing Brett and Elena's betrayal. They think you should have handled it more discreetly." I felt my hands clench into fists, frustration bubbling up inside me. "Dean, you know as well as I do that Brett and Elena were plotting to take this bakery away from me. I couldn't just sit back and let that happen." He nodded, his expression sympathetic. "I understand, Julianne. I really do. But you have to understand, not everyone sees it that way. There's a growing sentiment that you were more interested in revenge than justice." I let out a bitter laugh. "Revenge? This isn't about revenge, Dean. This is about protecting my life's work, my legacy. How can they not see that?" Dean placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "I believe you, Julianne. But you have to understand, the more you push back, the more you risk alienating the very people who could be your greatest allies." I shook my head, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "So what am I supposed to do, Dean? Just let them get away with it?" "No, of course not," he replied, his voice calm and measured. "But you need to be strategic about this. You need to find a way to win back the trust of the community, to show them that your actions were driven by a desire to protect, not destroy." I chewed on my lip, my mind racing, as I tried to come up with a plan. "Okay. So what do you suggest I do?" Dean's lips curved into a small smile. Well, for starters, we could use this as an opportunity to showcase your bakery's strengths. We could host a community event, something that brings people together and reminds them of the positive impact your business has had on the town. I nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope ignite within me. That's a good idea. We could do a baking workshop, or maybe a charity event where we donate a portion of the proceeds to a local organization. Exactly, Dean said, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, and we can use it as a chance to show the community that you're not just fighting for yourself, but for the greater good of this town. I felt a surge of gratitude towards Dean, his support and guidance a much-needed lifeline in the midst of the chaos. Thank you, Dean. I don't know what I'd do without you. He smiled and gave my arm a gentle squeeze. That's what friends are for. Now let's get to work on planning this event. We've got a community to win back. With a renewed sense of purpose, I rolled up my sleeves and dove headfirst into the task at hand, determined to reclaim my place in the hearts and minds of the people I had once called my own. The community event we organized was a resounding success, drawing crowds of eager participants and restoring a sense of unity and purpose within the town. As I watched people engage in baking workshops, share stories, and come together in support of local charities, I felt a cautious optimism begin to take root. However, the legal battle against Brett and Alina continued to rage on, and the strain was beginning to take its toll. Maggie worked tirelessly, gathering evidence and preparing our case. But Brett and his team of high-powered lawyers fought tooth and nail to thwart our efforts. The day of the trial arrived, and I found myself standing outside the courthouse, my heart pounding with a mix of nerves and determination. Maggie placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You ready for this, Julianne?" she asked, her voice low and serious. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. As ready as I'll ever be. Let's do this. As we entered the courtroom, I spotted Brett and Elena seated at the defense table, their expressions a mask of defiance. I steeled myself, refusing to let their presence rattle me. The proceedings began, with Maggie meticulously laying out our case, presenting the evidence we had gathered over the past months. She painted a damning picture of Brett and Elena's scheme, leaving no room for doubt. But Brett and his attorneys were relentless, throwing up roadblock after roadblock, challenging every piece of evidence and questioning the validity of our claims. At one point, the opposing counsel turned their sights on me, their questioning becoming increasingly aggressive. "Miss Julianne, isn't it true that you resorted to underhanded tactics in your quest to expose my clients?" The lawyer, a slick-haired man with a sharp, accusatory gaze, asked. I felt my hackles rise, but I forced myself to remain calm. I did what I had to do to protect my livelihood and the legacy I've built in this community. Brett and Elena's actions left me with no other choice. "So you admit that your methods were questionable at best?" the lawyer pressed, his tone dripping with disdain. I shook my head, my eyes narrowing. My methods were necessary to uncover the truth and prevent a greater injustice. I refused to apologize for standing up for what's right. The lawyer's lips curled into a sneer. "And yet, the very community you claim to care about has turned against you. Isn't that proof enough that your actions were more about personal vengeance than justice?" I felt my heart sink as I glanced around the courtroom, seeing the uncertainty and skepticism etched on the faces of the onlookers. Had I truly gone too far in my quest for retribution? Before I could respond, Maggie stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "Objection, Your Honor. The counsel is clearly attempting to discredit my client through irrelevant and inflammatory questioning." The judge nodded, his brow furrowed. "Sustained. The counsel will refrain from making such accusations and stick to the facts of the case." As the trial continued, I watched with bated breath as the evidence mounted against Brett and Alina. Their web of lies unraveled, exposing the depth of their betrayal and their desperate attempts to cover their tracks. In the end, the verdict was unanimous. Brett and Alina were found guilty of embezzlement and conspiracy to defraud. As the judge delivered the sentence, I felt a sense of vindication, but it was tempered by the realization that the cost of my victory had been higher than I ever imagined. As the dust settled on the trial, I found myself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, I felt a sense of vindication, knowing that justice had prevailed and that Brett and Alina would face the consequences of their actions. But on the other, I couldn't shake the lingering feeling of unease that had taken root within me. The community that had once rallied behind me was now fractured, with some still harboring resentment towards my methods. I knew I had to find a way to mend those wounds, to rebuild the trust and unity that had once defined our little town. One morning, as I was opening the bakery, the familiar sound of the bell above the door announced the arrival of Dean. He strode in, a determined glint in his eye. "Julianne, I've been thinking," he began, his voice tinged with excitement. "I think it's time we take the bakery in a new direction." I raised an eyebrow, my curiosity piqued. "What do you mean, Dean?" He leaned in, his expression earnest. "Well, we've been through a lot these past few months, and I think it's time we use this as an opportunity to reinvent ourselves, to show the community that this bakery is about more than just bread and pastries. It's about bringing people together, about being a pillar of this town." I listened intently, feeling a spark of hope ignite within me. "I'm listening." "You're overreacting as always. Can't you just get over it and move on?" Bryce's dismissive words hit me like a slap across the face. I stared at him in disbelief, my chest tightening as the all-too-familiar frustration boiled within me. How many times had I pleaded with him to understand what I was going through with my health issues? How many nights did I cry myself to sleep, longing for his compassion and support? "Get over it," I echoed, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Bryce, I'm in constant pain. The fatigue is crippling. I can't just get over a chronic condition that modern medicine still doesn't fully comprehend." Bryce rolled his eyes, his expression a mixture of annoyance and indifference. Yeah, I've heard it all before. You really need to stop using that as an excuse for everything." My hands trembled as a wave of anger washed over me. An excuse. Did he truly believe I was making up the suffering I endured day after day, year after year? "You know what? I'm done," I said, my voice quivering with pent-up emotion. "I'm done trying to make you understand something you clearly have no interest in comprehending." Bryce scoffed and turned his attention back to the television, effectively dismissing me and my struggles once again. I stormed out of the living room, fighting back tears of frustration and hurt. As I made my way to the bedroom, memories of our once loving relationship flooded my mind. Where was the man who had vowed to love and support me through sickness and health? The one who had held me close and promised to always be by my side? That man was long gone, replaced by this shell of a person who seemed to care more about maintaining the perfect facade than truly being there for his wife. I collapsed onto the bed, burying my face in the pillow as sobs racked my body. How had we come to this? How had the love and understanding we once shared disintegrated into this bitter, toxic dynamic? As I lay there, a newfound determination took root within me. I couldn't continue living like this, constantly invalidated and disrespected by the person who was supposed to be my partner in life. Enough was enough. I sat up, wiping away the tears, and reached for the journal I had been keeping over the past few years. With trembling hands, I began to document this latest incident, determined to gather evidence of Bryce's emotional abuse. The dismissive comments, the lack of empathy, the constant belittling of my struggles, I would record it all. This would be the start of my journey towards reclaiming my dignity and self-worth. I would no longer be a victim, cowering in the face of Bryce's cruelty. It was time to take a stand, to expose the truth, and to seek justice for the years of pain and neglect I had endured. The words flowed from my pen, fueled by a potent mix of anger, heartache, and a newfound sense of resolve. This was the final straw, the catalyst for the upheaval that was about to unfold. I was done being the silent, suffering wife. It was time for Bryce to face the consequences of his actions. I should have seen the signs earlier, but love can blind even the most perceptive of souls. Bryce and I had been a perfect match in the beginning, two kindred spirits, united in our hopes and dreams for the future. We'd feed off each other's energy, our laughter filling the air as we built the foundation of what we thought would be an unbreakable bond. How naive I had been. The first crack appeared shortly after our wedding, when I began exhibiting strange symptoms that no doctor could properly diagnose. The debilitating fatigue, the widespread pain, the cognitive issues. They all remained an unsolvable mystery, an invisible enemy waging war on my body and mind. At first, Bryce was sympathetic, assuring me that we would get through this together. In sickness and in health, remember, he would say, holding me close as I cried from the frustration of not understanding what was happening to me. Those tender moments became rarer as the years passed, and my condition only worsened. Bryce grew increasingly distant, frustrated by the lack of a clear solution. His patience wore thin, and the man I had fallen in love with slowly faded away, replaced by someone cold and callous. "Quit making excuses and pull yourself together," he snapped one day when I struggled to complete a simple household chore. "You're letting this supposed illness control your life." I tried to explain, to make him understand the genuine anguish I was experiencing, but he would hear none of it. In his eyes, I had become a burden, a blight on the perfect life he had envisioned for us. Outward appearances meant everything to Bryce. He couldn't bear the thought of our family being perceived as anything less than perfect, even as our son Derek grew increasingly aware of the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. "Why is Dad always so angry with you?" Derek asked me once, his eyes full of concern. I forced a smile, not wanting to tarnish his image of his father. "It's nothing, sweetheart. He's just under a lot of stress at work." The lies piled up, each one a brick in the facade Bryce was so desperate to maintain. We were the perfect family, with the perfect house and the perfect life. At least, that's what we wanted the world to believe. Behind closed doors, the reality was far more sinister. "You're pathetic, you know that?" Bryce snarled at me one evening after I had spent the day bedridden, too weak and in too much pain to function. "This is just a convenient way for you to be lazy and avoid your responsibilities." His words cut deeper than any knife, reopening the wounds of inadequacy that his emotional abuse had inflicted over the years. I wanted to scream, to hurl every ounce of anguish back in his face, but the strength had long since been drained from me. So I remained silent, my tears the only outward display of the turmoil raging within. That's when I knew the man I had married was gone, consumed by his obsession with maintaining the illusion of perfection. The love and support I had once treasured had been replaced by disdain and contempt, all because I couldn't meet his warped expectations. In that moment, a small spark of defiance ignited within me, a glimmer of determination that would grow into an all-consuming blaze. I wouldn't stay trapped in this toxic cycle any longer. One way or another, I would strip away Bryce's carefully constructed facade and expose the ugliness that festered beneath. He would face the consequences of his actions, of the years of emotional torment he had inflicted upon me. The road ahead would be arduous, but I knew in my heart that it was the only path to reclaiming my dignity and self-worth. The mask of perfection would shatter, and the truth would finally be laid bare, no matter the cost. The facade Bryce had so carefully constructed was beginning to crumble. As my health deteriorated further, it became impossible for me to keep up the charade of being the perfect wife and homemaker. Simple tasks like cooking and cleaning left me utterly drained, my body feeling like a lead weight that refused to cooperate. Of course, this only added fuel to Bryce's disdain. "What's the point of having you around if you can't even take care of basic household duties?" he sneered, surveying the pile of unwashed dishes in the sink. I wanted to explain, to make him understand the sheer effort it took for me just to get through each day, but I knew it would fall on deaf ears. Bryce had made up his mind about my condition long ago. In his eyes, it was nothing more than a convenient excuse. "I'm sorry," I mustered, hating how weak and defeated I sounded. "I'll try harder, I promise." Bryce scoffed and shook his head in disgust. "Save your empty promises. You've been trying harder for years, yet nothing ever changes." The venom in his words cut deep, but I remained silent, too emotionally and physically drained to engage in another fruitless argument. As the weeks passed, Bryce's insults and complaints escalated, each one chipping away at what little self-worth I had left. I found solace in my journal, pouring out the anguish and frustration that I couldn't voice aloud. It was during one of these writing sessions that Derek knocked on my bedroom door, a concerned look etched on his face. "Mom, are you okay? I heard Dad yelling at you again." I fought back the tears that threatened to spill and forced a reassuring smile. "Everything's fine, honey. Your father's just been under a lot of stress lately. Derek didn't look convinced, but he nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a sadness that no child should ever have to bear. As he left, I couldn't help but wonder how much of Bryce's behavior he had witnessed over the years. Had I been naive in thinking I could shield him from the harsh reality of our crumbling marriage? That night, as Bryce slept soundly beside me, I stayed awake, my mind racing with a newfound determination. I couldn't continue living like this, constantly demeaned and belittled by the man who was supposed to love and cherish me. Enough was enough. I reached for my journal, the pages now filled with a meticulous documentation of Bryce's emotional abuse. Every cutting remark, every dismissive gesture, every act of cruelty laid bare in ink. As I flipped through the pages, a sense of empowerment washed over me. This was my evidence, my ammunition in the battle I was about to wage against the man who had made my life a living hell. I wouldn't be the silent, suffering wife any longer. It was time to take action, to expose Bryce for the monster he had become and seek justice for the years of pain and neglect he had inflicted upon me. The first step would be to confide in my sister, Jenna. She had always been my rock, my unwavering support system through the darkest of times. With her by my side, I knew I would have the strength to face whatever lay ahead. A plan began to form in my mind, the pieces slowly falling into place. I would gather every shred of evidence, every damning proof of Bryce's vile behavior, until I had an airtight case against him. Then, and only then, would I strike, shattering his carefully constructed facade and exposing the ugliness that festered beneath. It would be a long and arduous road, but I was ready to fight. For too long, I had been the victim, cowering in fear and shame. But no more. This time, justice would be mine. Our 20th wedding anniversary should have been a joyous occasion, a celebration of the love and commitment that had carried us through 2 decades of marriage. Instead, it became a painful reminder of how far Bryce and I had drifted apart. He had insisted on going out to an upscale restaurant, wanting to maintain the facade of a happy, successful couple in front of our friends and family. I had reluctantly agreed, knowing full well that any objection on my part would only ignite another heated argument. As I slowly made my way down the stairs, the simple act of getting dressed and ready had left me utterly drained. Bryce was waiting at the bottom, drumming his fingers impatiently against his watch. "It's about time," he grumbled, eyeing my weary appearance with disdain. "We're already running late." I mustered an apologetic smile, too exhausted to offer any excuses. We made our way to the restaurant in silence, the tension between us palpable. The evening only grew more excruciating as it progressed. Bryce basked in the attention of our guests, regaling them with tales of his career successes, while I sat quietly, sipping water to quell the nausea that had taken hold. At one point, our friend Jennifer turned to me with a warm smile. "Marla, you must be so proud of Bryce and everything he's accomplished." Before I could respond, Bryce cut in with a bitter chuckle. If only she put in half as much effort into our marriage as I do at work. The table fell silent, a collective tension hanging in the air. I felt the blood drain from my face as Bryce's words sank in, each one a dagger to my already fragile heart. "Excuse me?" I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Bryce shook his head in mock disappointment. "Come on, Marla. We all know you've been using your little condition as an excuse to be lazy and neglect your duties as a wife." The venom in his tone was unmistakable, laying bare the contempt he harbored for me and my struggles. I wanted to scream, to hurl his cruelty back in his face, but the shock had rendered me mute. Our friends and family shifted uncomfortably, averting their gazes as the once celebratory atmosphere turned toxic. No one dared to intervene, to call out Bryce's abhorrent behavior. He leaned back in his chair, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. "See? She can't even defend herself. Pathetic." Those words would haunt me for years to come, searing themselves into my memory like a brand. In that moment, everything became crystallized. The years of emotional abuse, the gaslighting, the utter disregard for my well-being. As I sat there, humiliated and defeated, something within me shifted. A fire ignited in the depths of my soul, a burning rage that had been simmering for far too long. Enough was enough. I would no longer be Bryce's punching bag, his victim to be ridiculed and demeaned at his whim. The gloves were coming off, and I would stop at nothing to bring him to his knees, to make him suffer as he had made me suffer for so long. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, my mind already plotting my vengeance. Bryce continued to revel in his cruelty, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. As we arrived home, I went straight to my room, locking the door behind me. I reached for my journal, my hands trembling, as I began to document every agonizing detail of the night's events. This would be the tipping point, the catalyst that would set my plan into motion. Bryce had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and he would pay dearly for his transgressions. I would gather every shred of evidence, every recorded instance of his emotional and psychological torture. Then, when the time was right, I would unleash it all upon him, shattering his world and leaving him to contend with the consequences of his actions. No more suffering in silence, no more being the victim. It was time for Bryce to face the wrath he had so recklessly provoked. In the days following our disastrous anniversary dinner, I could feel a shift taking place within me. The years of pent-up anger and resentment had finally reached a boiling point, igniting a fire that burned with the intensity of 1,000 suns. Bryce, oblivious as ever, carried on as if nothing had happened. He went about his daily routine, leaving for work each morning with a casual "see you later" tossed over his shoulder. Meanwhile, I stewed in my righteous fury, meticulously documenting every instance of his cruelty in my journal. It was during one of these writing sessions that Jenna stopped by unannounced. She took one look at my reddened eyes and the turmoil etched into my features before enveloping me in a tight embrace. "Oh, Marla," she murmured, her voice laced with concern. "What's going on?" I pulled away, steeling myself against the torrent of emotion that threatened to spill forth. "It's Bryce," I began, the words tumbling out in a rush. He humiliated me, Jenna, in front of everyone at our anniversary dinner." Jenna's brow furrowed as I recounted the painful details, her expression darkening with each word. By the time I had finished, her hands were balled into tight fists, trembling with barely contained rage. "That bastard," she hissed, her eyes blazing with a protective fury. "How could he treat you like that? After everything you've been through?" I shook my head, feeling a sudden surge of determination. "I can't live like this anymore, Jenna. The emotional abuse, the constant belittling, it has to stop." Jenna nodded, her jaw set in a firm line. "You're right. Enough is enough. What are you going to do?" A plan had already begun to take shape in my mind, a meticulously crafted blueprint for revenge. "I'm going to gather evidence," I explained, my voice steady and resolute. "Every recording, every journal entry, every shred of proof of Bryce's cruelty. Then, when the time is right, I'm going to unleash it all and watch his world crumble around him." Jenna's eyes widened, a mixture of shock and admiration flickering across her features. "Marla, are you sure about this? This is a nuclear option. There's no going back once you pull the trigger." I nodded, my jaw clenched with grim determination. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Bryce needs to face the consequences of his actions, of the years of emotional torture he's put me through. He needs to be exposed for the monster he truly is. A slow smile spread across Jenna's face, a fierce pride radiating from her very being. "Okay, sis, I'm in. Whatever you need, I've got your back." Relief washed over me, knowing that I wouldn't be facing this battle alone. With Jenna by my side, I felt an overwhelming sense of strength, a certainty that I would emerge victorious. Over the next few weeks, we worked tirelessly, gathering every scrap of evidence we could find. Journals, recordings, photographs, nothing was left out. We built an ironclad case against Bryce, one that would leave no room for doubt or denial. As our arsenal grew, so too did my sense of empowerment. The fear and shame that had once shackled me began to dissipate, replaced by a burning desire for justice and retribution. Bryce remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing, carrying on with his daily routine as if nothing were amiss. He would sneer at me whenever our paths crossed, his lips curling in a contemptuous sneer that only fueled my determination. "What's the matter, Marla?" he would taunt. "Still wallowing in self-pity, I see." I would meet his gaze, unflinching, biting back the biting retort that danced on the tip of my tongue. Soon, I told myself. Soon, he would pay for every ounce of pain and humiliation he had inflicted upon me. As the final pieces of our plan fell into place, I felt a sense of exhilaration coursing through my veins. The day of reckoning was fast approaching, and Bryce had no idea what was in store. He had made the mistake of underestimating me, of believing that I would cower and submit to his abuse forever. But no more. This time, I would be the one holding all the cards, and Bryce would learn the true meaning of suffering. The facade he had so carefully constructed was about to come crashing down, and I would be the one wielding the sledgehammer. The day of reckoning had finally arrived, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Jenna and I had spent weeks meticulously planning every detail, leaving no stone unturned in our quest for justice. It was the annual Wyatt family reunion, a gathering that Bryce had always insisted on attending, despite our crumbling marriage. This year, however, the event would serve as the perfect stage for his downfall. As we pulled into the driveway of my parents' home, I could see the familiar faces of extended family members already gathered on the lawn. Bryce plastered on his usual charming smile, ever the master of deception. "Remember, honey," he murmured, leaning in close, "we have to keep up appearances. No need to burden everyone with our personal issues." I fought back the urge to recoil from his touch, nodding in feigned agreement. Little did he know, the facade he had so carefully cultivated was about to be shattered beyond repair. We mingled with the crowd, making small talk and accepting well wishes from relatives we hadn't seen in ages. All the while, Jenna and I exchanged covert glances, silently signaling that it was time to put our plan into motion. After the initial greetings had concluded, Jenna cleared her throat, calling for everyone's attention. "If I could have a moment, please," she began, her voice ringing out across the lawn. "There's something important that needs to be addressed." Bryce shot me a quizzical look, but I remained impassive, my expression betraying nothing. "For too long, a grave injustice has been allowed to fester within our family," Jenna continued, her gaze sweeping across the gathered crowd. "An injustice that we can no longer turn a blind eye to." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the crowd, but Jenna pressed on undeterred. "Bryce Wyatt has been emotionally and psychologically abusing his wife, Marla, for years. Today, we're going to put an end to his cruelty, once and for all." A hush fell over the gathering as Jenna's words sank in. Bryce's face contorted in a mixture of shock and outrage, but before he could interject, Jenna was already unveiling our carefully curated evidence. Audio recordings of Bryce's vicious tirades filled the air, his voice dripping with venom and contempt as he hurled insult after insult at me. Documented journal entries detailing the years of emotional torment were passed around, laying bare the depths of his cruelty. And then, the pièce de résistance, the video footage from our anniversary dinner, capturing Bryce's public humiliation in all its excruciating detail. As the scene played out on the screen, gasps and murmurs of outrage echoed through the crowd. Bryce stood frozen, his mouth agape as the carefully constructed facade he had so meticulously maintained came crashing down around him. "How could you?" My mother's voice cut through the tension, her eyes brimming with tears. "How could you treat my daughter that way?" Bryce stammered, grasping for an excuse, but no words came. He was a cornered animal, his true nature finally exposed for all to see. One by one, family members turned their backs on him, their expressions a mix of disgust and disbelief. Bryce's once charming demeanor had been stripped away, revealing the ugly truth that had been lurking beneath all along. As the weight of his actions bore down upon him, Bryce's veneer of confidence crumbled. He turned to me, his eyes pleading for mercy, for understanding. "Marla, please," he began, but I held up a hand, silencing him. "Enough," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "You've had your chance to be a decent human being, and you squandered it. Now you're going to face the consequences of your actions." Bryce opened his mouth to protest, but thought better of it. In that moment, he knew he had lost the respect of his family, lost the facade of perfection he had so desperately clung to, lost any semblance of control over the situation. As he slunk away, a broken and defeated man, I felt a surge of vindication wash over me. Justice had been served, and the years of suffering and humiliation had finally been avenged. Jenna pulled me into a fierce embrace, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it, sis," she whispered. "You took that bastard down." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but for the first time in years I felt truly free. Free from the shackles of Bryce's emotional abuse, free to reclaim my life and dignity. As the crowd dispersed, offering words of support and encouragement, I knew that this was just the beginning. Bryce's downfall was merely the first step in a journey towards healing and empowerment, and I was ready to embrace it, one step at a time. In the days following the explosive family reunion, the fallout from Bryce's exposure was swift and unrelenting. His life, once so meticulously constructed to project an image of perfection, lay in shattered ruins around him. I, on the other hand, felt a sense of liberation unlike anything I had experienced before. For years I had been shackled by Bryce's emotional abuse, my spirit slowly eroded by his cruelty. But now, with the truth laid bare, I was finally free. The first order of business was securing a divorce. Jenna had put me in touch with a formidable legal team, and within a matter of days the paperwork was filed. Bryce, still reeling from the public humiliation, offered little resistance. "You're making a mistake," he muttered during one of our brief encounters, his eyes downcast and defeated. "Think about what this will do to Derek." I leveled my gaze at him, feeling no shred of sympathy for the man who had tormented me for years. "I am thinking about Derek," I replied, my voice unwavering, "and I'm doing what's best for him, removing him from an environment of toxicity and abuse." Bryce flinched as if he had been struck, but I pressed on, relentless. "You've only got yourself to blame for this, Bryce. Your actions have consequences, whether you choose to acknowledge them or not." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him to stew in the wreckage of his own making. As news of our impending divorce spread, the backlash against Bryce intensified. Friends and colleagues who had once praised his accomplishments now distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with a man exposed as an emotional abuser. Even Derek, our once doting son, could no longer bring himself to look his father in the eye. "How could you treat Mom like that?" he asked during one of their strained encounters, his voice thick with emotion. "She sacrificed everything for this family, and you just... Words failed him, but his expression spoke volumes. The hero worship he had once held for Bryce had been shattered, replaced by a profound sense of disappointment and betrayal. Bryce, for his part, tried to cling to the tattered remnants of his former life. He lashed out at me, accusing me of turning his own family against him, of poisoning their minds with lies and deceit. "You're a vindictive, spiteful woman," he snarled during one of his tirades. "You'll regret this, Marla. Mark my words." But his threats rang hollow, devoid of the power and menace they once held. I simply stared back at him, unmoved by his pathetic attempts at intimidation. "I don't regret a thing, Bryce," I replied, my voice laced with a steely resolve. "For the first time in years, I'm living in the truth, something you've clearly never been able to handle." His face contorted in a mask of rage, but I had already turned away, leaving him to wallow in his own self-pity and delusion. With each passing day, Bryce's world continued to crumble around him. His once thriving career began to unravel as clients and business partners severed ties, unwilling to be associated with such a tarnished reputation. It was a sight to behold, watching this once proud man brought to his knees by the very demons he had unleashed upon me. And yet, I felt no pity, no shred of remorse for the suffering he now endured. This was justice, pure and simple, a reckoning long overdue. As the divorce proceedings neared their conclusion, I found myself reflecting on the long and arduous journey that had led me to this point. The years of suffering, the constant belittling and emotional abuse, the endless nights spent wondering where the man I had married had gone. But now, as I prepared to embark on a new chapter of my life, those memories seemed to fade into the distance. The shackles that had once bound me had been broken, and I was finally free to spread my wings and soar. Jenna pulled me into a fierce embrace as the final papers were signed, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and relief. "You did it, sis," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You survived the storm, and you came out stronger on the other side." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that better days lay ahead, free from the toxicity and cruelty that had once defined my existence. As I stepped out into the world, a newfound sense of empowerment coursed through my veins. I was a survivor, a warrior who had faced the darkness head-on and emerged victorious. And Bryce? Well, he was nothing more than a footnote in my story, a mere obstacle that had been overcome, a reminder of the strength and resilience that burned within me. The future was mine to shape, and I intended to seize it with both hands, leaving the pain and suffering of the past far behind me. A new chapter was about to begin, and I couldn't wait to see what it had in store. Chapter 8: A New Beginning. The divorce had been finalized, and with it, a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I was officially free from the shackles of Bryce's emotional abuse, free to start anew and reshape my life on my own terms. Of course, that didn't mean the process was easy. There were still hurdles to overcome, lingering scars from years of torment that would take time to heal. But I was committed to the journey, fueled by a newfound sense of determination and self-worth. The first order of business was securing a favorable settlement, one that would provide me with the financial means to build the life I deserved. Jenna's legal team had proven their mettle, negotiating a generous payout that encompassed a sizable portion of our shared assets. "You earned every penny of this, Marla," Jenna assured me as we reviewed the settlement details. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I nodded, still somewhat in disbelief that this chapter of my life was truly coming to a close. For so long I had been trapped in a cycle of fear and self-doubt, conditioned by Bryce's emotional manipulations to believe that I deserved nothing better. But now, with the evidence of his cruelty laid bare and the law on my side, I could finally break free from those toxic thought patterns. I was worthy of happiness, of respect, of building a life on my own terms. With the financial security provided by the settlement, I made the decision to invest a portion of the funds into a cause close to my heart, a foundation dedicated to supporting others suffering from the same chronic condition that had once been the catalyst for Bryce's abuse. It was a way for me to turn my pain into purpose, to ensure that no one else would have to endure the isolation and emotional torment that I had faced for so many years. "This is amazing, Mom," Derek said, his eyes shining with pride as we toured the Foundation's newly opened headquarters. "I can't think of a better way to help people and raise awareness." I pulled him into a tight embrace, overwhelmed by the surge of emotions welling up within me. For too long, I had shielded Derek from the harsh realities of my marriage, desperate to preserve his image of his father. But now, with the truth laid bare, we were able to forge a deeper connection, built on honesty and mutual respect. "Thank you, sweetheart," I murmured, fighting back tears of joy. "Your support means everything to me." As the foundation took shape and our outreach efforts began in earnest, I found myself bearing witness to the incredible resilience of the human spirit. The stories I encountered, the tales of perseverance in the face of overwhelming adversity, only served to strengthen my own resolve. I was no longer the broken, downtrodden woman who had once cowered in fear of her husband's wrath. I was a survivor, a warrior who had emerged from the ashes of emotional abuse, stronger and more determined than ever before. And Bryce? Well, his fate had been sealed the moment he chose to prioritize his own selfish desires over the well-being of his family. The once powerful businessman had become a pariah, his reputation in tatters and his professional prospects all but non-existent. I caught glimpses of him from time to time, a mere shadow of his former self, disheveled, haunted by the demons of his own making. Our paths would cross, and for a fleeting moment our eyes would meet, a silent acknowledgement of the chasm that now separated us. But I felt no pity, no remorse for the man who had inflicted so much pain and suffering upon me. This was the bed he had made for himself, and now he would lie in it, forever haunted by the consequences of his actions. As for me, I was focused on the future, a future that seemed brighter and more promising with each passing day. The foundation continued to grow, its reach extending to communities across the country, offering solace and support to those who had once felt so alone. And at the center of it all was a woman reborn, a phoenix risen from the ashes of emotional turmoil, spreading her wings and soaring towards new horizons. It was a new beginning, a fresh start that had been hard-won through years of struggle and perseverance. And as I looked ahead, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this point. The road had been long and arduous, But in the end, justice had prevailed. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my sense of self-worth. And for that, I would be forever grateful. A new chapter was unfolding, and I intended to embrace it wholeheartedly, leaving the pain and anguish of the past firmly behind me. The future was mine, and I couldn't wait to see what it had in store.